What's up, pal? What's up there, fellers? How you guys doing this evening? So apparently, America's democracy got downgraded by like some, I guess, Democrat or democracy tracking indices. We got downgraded from a liberal democracy to an just an electoral democracy. Yeah, let's get into it.
Here's my take. I went to see Christopher Nolan's new movie, The Odyssey, to watch a summer blockbuster, and it more than delivered. I did not intend to comment on the various controversies around the movie, from the attacks that it is woke to the historical inaccuracies in it. For goodness sakes, it's a nearly 3,000-year-old yarn that is filled with gods and goddesses, one-eyed giants, and lots of magic. But Ezra Klein's commentary on the movie did lead me to think about the broader issues the movie raises, which strike me as interesting and important. Klein argues that the critique of Nolan's Odyssey as woke, because he casts a black actress to play Helen, is trivial and superficial, but that the movie is liberal in a more profound sense. Nolan.
Oh, they say trivial and superficial, but they're the ones that started with the we want representation. You evil racist. And they are the one, like, they dare to say, oh, who cares? Who cares what color the person is that plays the character? What the hell? Rumbling? It's the same one that uh I I always stream on over there. I don't have it handy. Yeah, but like, there America has its own movie industry, and it employed its own people, which were white. And all the brown people freak out and demand representation. And then when they start replacing Helen of Troy with a black actress, and we have a problem with it, they have the gall to pretend like we're being petty. And that's always the case. Rules for thee and not for me. We're petty when we do it. When they do it, they're justified, or they're righteous. It's righteous indignation. They're righting past wrongs. And this whole narrative of this victim narrative, bro, it's a crock of it's garbage. It's rubbish. And you get the same thing from feminists when anytime you talk about men or helping men, they bring up, oh, wife beating husbands. And they always, that their strategy is legitimately to take the extreme, the exception, the 1% or less, and beat that drum until they have people envisioning a world where the 1% is the majority. 1% of men ever touch a woman in anger in their lives. But the way the feminists talk about it, you would think that we've all beat a woman. It's incredible.
fundamentally inverts the morality of the ancient world in which conquest and victory was celebrated unabashedly and replaces it with the morality that is more nuanced. While Homer's Odysseus was constantly lauded for his clever, guileful ways, Nolan's Odysseus is haunted by the ravages of the war and by his own deceit that was at the center of the victory, the Trojan horse. Beginning with Christianity, the West gradually replaced the pagan ethic of naked conquest and domination with one centered on universal human dignity, compassion, and empathy. Blessed are the meek, for they shall inherit the earth, says the Gospel of Matthew, words that no Homeric hero would ever utter. Pre-Christian.
Yeah, no Indian uh, Nawab prince would utter it either. No Chinese uh, emperor would utter that. But specifically, yet no Indian uh, ruler would utter that. It was Europeans that said that. Well, Christ, and then Europeans, but I'm not so sure if what he's talking about is progress, actually. Because people moved. At least they did. They wandered, they were nomadic, and then they would settle. People would live like Romans lived in Rome, and then they don't even exist today. So there's a natural ebb and flow. And I'm not so sure that the what he's talking about, equality and this and that, I'm not so sure that it is the best thing because it totally removes any competition, survival of the fittest. I'm not saying a state of nature is desirable, but I don't know. There's something the modern world we live in and what do they call the post world war order, where everybody, if you have a conflict, it's out in the open and you have to fight fair. It's Marquis of Queensbury rules. And that's how they tried to make it anyway. But it like sort of locks everything into a static orientation. It locks the world, and human beings can't just live and do their thing. Populations can't grow and shrink and displace others. And, like Turkey, the Seljuks and the Mamluks, I think it was the Seljuk Turks, they grew as a population and swallowed up the Byzantine Empire and conquered, what was the Ottoman Empire. But they were previously a nobody tribe, a nomadic tribe, a steppe people, like the Mongols, like the Cossacks or the Ukrainians. They were steppe people. A lot of fierce people come from the steppe, and same thing in America with the Comanche and different plains Indians. They were steppe people, and one of the hallmarks of steppe people is their horsemanship. That's why they're such fierce warriors, because they're really they have an expert level of prowess in animal husbandry, and they fight their wars on horseback, which makes them incredibly. But the Huns were like that too. Attila the Hun, and they would conquer vast swathes of land and almost lose it as quickly as they gain it too. That's what's kind of crazy. Like the Mongols, they took over all this area and then just faded away at some point. There's Anyway, I digress. But I'm just saying, populations don't have the wo- humans don't have the opportunity to just be organic. And I think that is the crux of the main critique of modern society. Like I've just started to craft this critique. Like within the last maybe 48 hours, it's starting to take shape, starting to see something. And I think it's really big. We're looking at possibly the end of something, of a human era, certainly the end of something, just like the fall of the Soviet Union was the end of something. When you think about it, communism and progressivism came about at the exact same time. And this whole modern idea of liberalism came about at the same time. And what I'm sort of noticing, and what's hypothesis I'm talking about is, these ideologies sprung up as like sister ideology, siblings. Well, communism dashed itself against the rocks, basically, but Soviet Union collapsed, and I'm wondering if we are the second shoe to drop. That since the Soviet Union collapsed, we've just been sort of like in limbo, like they were after World War I, waiting for uh, the liberal system to collapse. And it strikes me that there's something to that. It has the ring of truth in my mind. At least something. Has some ring of truth. And I was thinking about it too, maybe this is a Western thing as well, because uh, even communism is Western. And that collapse. I'm just wondering, maybe we're in for a hell of a ride. I don't know. Maybe I'm wrong, but it seems like something not good is afoot.
Christian values are having a revival these days, as the populist right, often joined in by a new cadre of tech billionaires, look back with admiration to an older world in which strength, domination, and victory mattered more than empathy or equality. For Donald Trump, winning is all that matters, justifying all means. He uses the word incessantly. In a 60 Minutes interview in 2018, when asked about his demeaning comments about Christine Blasey Ford, the woman who accused Brett Kavanaugh of sexual assault, Trump said simply,
"We won. It doesn't matter. We won."
In a best-selling book, Suicidal Empathy, Gad Saad, one of Elon Musk's favorites on X, argues that the West is declining because it cares too much about too many outsiders, minorities, even its foes. In fact, the greatest moral achievement of the West over the last 2 millennia, and especially since the Enlightenment, has been the expansion of the circle of people who are considered fully human, having equal dignity and equal rights. We've come to recognize the humanity of people once dismissed as slaves, serfs, and second-class citizens, foreigners, women, racial minorities, people with differing sexual orientations. These ideas spread throughout the world because they are, in the words of the Declaration of Independence, self-evident. This is one of the West's greatest achievements, not a decadent sickness. But there is a serious critique.
No, I don't know. is the West's greatest achievements? Maybe they are, but they're also just sort of these are thoughts, or ideas on how to be, not set in stone. These aren't these ideas are not human nature. Nothing about them are have any sort of permanence. You know what I mean? Like these aren't an inherent part of human nature. And people, they tend to have sort of a set it and forget it mindset, for lack of a better term. Like, oh, women have the vote now, therefore they have the vote until we go extinct. Uh, homosexuality is normalized, therefore homosexuality be normalized till the end of time. And yeah, that's not definitely not the case. Definitely. But it remains to be seen whether all those things are are even an unmitigated good. That it's not at all evident or obvious to anybody that these things have resulted in more people being happy. Like straight up. Not even there's there was evidence. It did seem like there was a good argument for it for a decent amount of time. And then stuff starts going off the rails.
Buried beneath the crude MAGA attacks. It is one that Nietzsche leveled, and it's being reprised by some of the tech bros today. Nietzsche worried that Christianity's egalitarian ideas made us less likely to be wildly ambitious, risk seeking, even reckless. Have we become so humane that we've lost the primal urges that made us heroic? We should not romanticize civilizations built on blood, gore, and conquest simply because they produced heroes. But
Nobody's doing that, Fareed. Come on, bro. Nobody is doing that. What we're saying is, hey, is this actually leading to a better outcome? Are we, is iron sharpening iron? Because that's how the human race worked for a long time. We only grew. We only discovered more. It was like there was progress. It wasn't continuous progress or like a continuous timeline. You had to follow the Roman Empire and stuff, but there was dynamism. Human race was on the move. It was changing. Peoples were clashing and rubbing elbows and becoming allies or enemies, and then locking in like bitter conflicts. And I'm not saying, not like advocating bitter conflicts, but there's a certain amount of dynamism there of change and variability and volatility. And it seems like today the only volatility that there is it's almost like reminds me of like controlled burns of like woods, or like here in Florida they control burn undergrowth fires down, the forest fires. But they're doing it with these awful wars, these wars of choice, they've coined the term. Rather than sovereign peoples kind of vying for position, jockeying for different land and prestige and position. It's a select group of elites or businessmen, politicians, whatever you want to call them. They used to complain about, oh, an elite group of kings or nobility. Well, nothing has changed, but they have all of the NPCs talking and acting as if there has been a change. as if that's not the case. It's like, no, it's the same crooked, greedy, evil uh, subsection of the population. It's almost like you can't escape them. There, wherever you go, there they are. You know what I mean? You can't, it's like you can't run from yourself. I think, and that is kind of what the deal is there. I remember somebody telling me that when I was younger doing drugs, saying, I'm going to move, I'm going to leave this place. And like, you can't run from yourself, but wherever you go, there you'll be stepping on your own Johnson. And I feel like it must just be something in us humans. Wherever we go, we bring it there. It's there waiting for us. There's no getting away from it. So I guess maybe we just got to live with it.
They built
With
more
those
than
people,
that.
anyway.
The pyramids, the Gothic cathedrals, the voyages of discovery, the Industrial Revolution emerged from societies animated by ambition, confidence, and a willingness to sacrifice. They often came with hierarchy and a single-minded focus on greatness. Some of populism.
I would submit that's not a bad way to be. Like focused on greatness as opposed to what we're doing now. You know what I mean? Like, it really the contrast there. It's like, yeah, and obviously that's not what we're focused on. No, we're focused on equality, not greatness.
Appeal today lies less in specific policies than a promise to restore national greatness, to build, to achieve, to win. But must we choose between greatness and goodness? After all, Western nations in the 19th and 20th century were the most liberal societies in human history in their day. And they were hardly timid. They built railroads across continents, abolished slavery, industrialized the world, rebuilt Europe and Japan, landed men on the moon, built the atomic bomb, and created the internet. Think of America in the mid-20th century. Ask the experts and they will tell you there is a clear trend. America's democracy.
I want to interject too. It's like, ooh, what's going on with the West? They once did all this and that and blah blah blah. And it's like, yeah, and when the hell are the colored people gonna do their part? When are they gonna get up off their asses and do something? When are they gonna contribute? Why is it we're having a rough time at the moment? And we got brown people talking shit to us, basically saying, oh, what, you out of ideas? Smarty pants? You out of ideas? Oh, where's your inventions? Where's your European IQ? Where's all that when you need it? Well, Mr. Zachariah, where's your contributions, homeboy?
Is in decline. The Freedom House's latest report that scores countries on political rights and civil liberties gave the U.S. an 81 out of 100, the country's lowest score since that index began its current scoring system. The VDEM Institute goes further this year, downgrading the U.S. from a liberal democracy to merely an electoral democracy. Other indices deliver similar.
What's kind of crazy is that strikes me as fair. Like, it just that rings true to me. Hey, thank you, Nook. Thank you, Mr. Fed. But that right there, that really does kind of fit. Like, yeah, it's not as responsive as a democracy as we thought. It doesn't react to our needs very quickly at all. It seems kind of calcified, ossified, still like a statue. It's not tight and can't move on a dime. it's needs to be reformed.
Verdicts. So, what ails America? Nobel Prize winning economist Darren Acemoglu has a diagnosis and a prescription in his new book, What Happened to Liberal.
Oh, bro, you're going to have a dude with the last name Acemoglu? This guy, I know, this is my favorite shirt too. But you're going to have some guy with the name Acemoglu is going to lecture the West. You couldn't find some Swiss dude or something?
Democracy. Welcome, Darren. So you won your Nobel Prize really for pointing out that the countries that have done the best over the last 100.
You hear that? He won the Nobel Prize for pointing something out. How does that happen? For pointing something out? It seems. I thought the Nobel Prize was for movers and shakers, people that were inventors that were at the beginning of their career, and the Nobel Prize was like a jump start, like to give new talent capital to put their ideas out there, not to reward random, you know, just some random brown person from from BFE, middle of nowhere or wherever, Acemoglu.
Of years are countries that found a way to build strong, effective, legitimate institutions. And liberal democracies are really the kind of poster child for that kind of development. Now you're writing about what went wrong with your poster child. So if you were to sum it up, what fundamentally has happened to liberal democracy that got you worried enough to write a book about it?
Thank you, first of all, for having me on the program and for asking that question, which goes to the heart of it. Indeed, liberal democracy is a worthy subject to study because it has been so important for our achievements. Our social achievements are really remarkable. I mean, if you think of where we come from, how our ancestors lived, the ability of forming such complex society that are peaceful, provide public services, and create the conditions for shared prosperity. That is just amazing. And we really owe that to liberal ideas and liberal democracy. And the reason why I'm writing about liberalism's crisis is because I think it is so important for our future as well. And unless we diagnose the problems, we're not going to be able to rebuild it. And the crisis, I think, is most visible if you look at people's views. Americans have such low trust in bedrock democratic institutions. They think liberalism's agenda doesn't work, and some of its founding principles, shared prosperity.
Whose fault is that? It's not the American people's fault. They're the ones that are supposed to vote, not the ones that are supposed to, bro, take it up with the dudes that have all the levers of power. Don't talk about us. Don't talk about, well, Americans, they don't have trust in their system. What, so you're saying we're the problem, not the broken system that won't do what we ask it to do? Strikes me as homeboy. He's barking up the wrong tree with that one. We are not the source of the problem here. We've been voting. We have voted like good, honest normies for centuries. We didn't just wake up one morning and decide, we're not holding with that system any. No, they betrayed us over and over and over. Look at the UK. Look at the border being thrown. Bro, these people are traitors on so many levels. Traitors to their people, their nation, their religion, their country. They're traitors. And he's talking about us? Come on now.
Public services and providing voice and self-government are all broken.
And you argue, I've written a book where I talked about how this was all the product of these revolutionary changes in technology and globalization. And it feels like your book is very compatible with that theory.
I am building on the shoulders of giants, indeed.
No, because you say that to you that the technological changes, the digitization of the economy, they have completely transformed societies. And as a result, liberal democracy, to many people, seems like it has failed. And it's failed with sins of omission and commission.
100%.
So tell us, what are the omission and what are the commissions?
So the sins of omission is that when globalization and especially digital technologies started complicating the building of shared prosperity, center-left parties were passive. They did not tackle the questions of the age.
No, they didn't just sit still. What they did was they said, that stuff over there is hard. It's difficult to fix or to set these things up and do it right. Because technology's changing, and there was a sucking sound from China taking our jobs, and the Democrats totally let it happen. Made no effort to bridge the gap. Weren't there for their people. Our government shafted us hard. They made no attempt to bridge the gap. They just told those people to learn to code, basically. And instead of actually protecting their constituents, actually looking out for those constituents, they went down they went down the identity politics route. They decided it was easier to call us racists and shout us down, wag their finger at us, than actually fix something, than actually do their civic duty. That's basically what they did. What happened? Maybe their motives weren't how I just described them, but what they did do, they let us down. They totally dropped the ball. That is that's fact. Like, that's not up for debate. They sold our jobs to China. They asset stripped America and left us in the lurch to get blindsided.
Which is, how can we make digital technologies work for everybody? They thought that this would just create better efficiency and everybody somehow ultimately, through perhaps a trickle-down process, benefit from it. Sins of commission came in the context of cultural politics, something that you have talked a lot about, which is that, it led to what I call social engineering, a top-down agenda to create more homogeneous values. There's nothing wrong in a diverse society like the United States or the UK for cultural issues to be part of politics. They had to be. But the way you approach them, I think, had to be more inclusive and more bottom-up. And in the process, the sins of commission were really problematic because they sidelined community.
So this is an important point because it's a live political issue now. What you're really saying is that the center left, which became increasingly college oriented with college graduates, began to, if I may put it this way, look down on the non-college educated, and to sort of force their cultural values on a society that was perhaps not ready for it, perhaps did not agree with it, right? I mean, that is so much of the tension in the Democratic Party even today between the so-called progressives.
Think about this, too. We used to have great social ties, and our social safety net in America was the best in the world. We didn't need government welfare or government health care. We had the social clubs and private private things that were just as good. And we had church, and most people went to church, especially people that weren't college educated. And that meant we had a really strong sort of foundation, social foundation, with wives all knowing each other. You know how they set up their social. They police their neighborhoods, watch the kids. But you have the social foundation there with church and moose lodges, different social clubs. You had those things, and just like Fareed's saying, you had people get college degrees and then start poo-pooing all that stuff. Then start attacking and dismantling those institutions that that held those people together, that supported people when they were in need, if they lost their job or whatever. It's like you went to church, and if you lost your job, the church would, they would immediately be like, okay, who can bring food over, so that they don't have to go without food? Who can cut their grass once a week? Does anybody here have a job that they can get him, or maybe some short-term work so we can get some money in their pocket? That's what these institutions were for. It allowed individuals and individual families to lay off uh, uh, tough times with their local immediate community, the people that they knew, that knew them, that cared about them. Like our government doesn't care about us, but that's all we have now. We don't have community. And if we need help, you better hope that the government's willing to give it to you. But back then, that wasn't the case. But all these people that get out of college, or all these college educated eggheads, the yuppies, remember how, or well, you guys don't remember, but some of you do. They systematically targeted and destroyed church and all of those wholesome American pastimes. They went just hammer and tongs to destroy. I mean, and they made fun of them as old fashioned or stupid superstition, and they had nothing to replace those things with. They at one time they destroyed these foundational institutions that made America great and made our communities like steel. They were unbreakable. They get rid of those things, and then they have nothing to replace them with. I mean, they deserve so much of our hatred because they didn't do this stuff to help us. This is all ideological garbage. And in our entire society, yo, it's not. This is why it's collapsing. Not because human beings, figured it out over time, trial and error. No, what we have now is a society. It's a social experiment to make men and women equal and the same. And that's why it's failing spectacularly. It's the same reason that the Soviet Union and communism collapsed and always collapses is because it's based on ideology. And rather than embracing, that used to be the beauty of America, because our system was more or less built on from stuff that worked, that people figured out. Capitalism, that it happens whether you want it to or not. But these were systems and ideas that had been tried. They were tried and true from England, who had been doing these things, capitalism, free market, uh, mercantilism. They'd been doing this stuff for like a millennia. But these ideologues, these progressives at the beginning of the 20th century, they decided that stuff wasn't good enough. They could do it better, that men and women should be equal, and women should be out working in offices, not raising children, because raising children, that's beneath women and human beings, beneath them. It's it's animal work, practice. And all the other things that they've done, all these other experiments. It's a social experiment. And these things, the way our system works, it's that way, not because it works, not because it takes into account human nature, but because it's their it adheres to an ideology. And that's why it's collapsing. Like, how many times have you guys seen a woman, these women that they start at 18 thinking they're going to set the world on fire, and they plan and they focus on their career. They don't even worry about children. Then they hit 30 years old and all of a sudden they feel like they were cheated and lied to and led astray. And they're deeply bitter, deeply resentful, because they followed what the culture told them to do. They followed what their teachers told them to do. They followed what women told them to do, what the older women told them to do. And then they get to 30 and they realize everything that they set their life up for means diddly squat to them. They want to have children. And their girl boss corporate job doesn't amount to a hill of beans. They don't give a pin's head for it. As far as they're concerned, you could set it all on fire. And their entire life, they may not have wanted kids. But nobody warned them and said, hey, you might want to plan for this. You might want to, try to set up a life that you can, try to set up a life that is flexible. So if you decide you want to have kids, you can have them. Whereas no, they're being told to burn their ships, to, like Christopher Columbus, burn the Pinta, the Santa Maria, and whatever the other one was, to burn them so that they have no choice. And then when they get to 30, they go, oh my God, why was I told to do that? This is insane. I want kids. That's all I want. And that's just the example I'm using. But this is our social order from top to bottom. It's a social experiment. It's not a society. It's not a functioning culture, a functioning society. It's all collapsing. It's all based on ideology, and it's all not in concert with human nature, but in spite of human nature. And it's not working. It's just collapsing around us, collapsing around mine ears. And these, the Nina. Okay. I was right, though. It was the Pinta, Santa Maria, and the Nina, correct? I always liked the Pinta. I like that name, the Pinta. I think that's a dope name. Like, bro, the Pinta. What do you know about it? The Pinto. I think the Pinta is just the female version of a Pinto.
And the mainstream. It's often on these cultural issues.
100%. Although I don't think the progressive versus mainstream divide really covers this, because I think a lot of the focus there is about how moderate, how fast, how radical, but even the centrists are not really reaching to the working classes.
No.
They're not.
They've all but given up on reaching the working class. And they're almost finished killing the middle class.
Really becoming more grounded in community. It wasn't part of every liberal idea. But if you look at the practice of liberal democracy and liberalism, and if you go back to its founding ideas from several centuries before, you see that community plays a very important role. Why? First of all, self-government is critical for liberal ideas. We cannot talk of free.
And you know what's critical for self-government? Education. How can a democracy work when you're actively sabotaging the knowledge base of your nation, of your people? When you're actively omitting information, omitting education, like making them dumber. It's a recipe for disaster. Self-governance, well, and you can see what they're doing. They don't want people to vote. They don't basically, and they've made it to where our vote doesn't matter. So they think, well, it doesn't matter if they're stupid. That makes them easier for us to govern. So we'll let the education degrade. But that seems rather short. It's short-sighted. It really is. Because look at where we're at now. And 18-year-olds getting out of college, they can't read. That's a problem. That's a real problem. Like 30% of them can't read. Like, whoa.
Of religion, freedom of expression, but without giving people a way to actualize them. And how do you actualize them? By making local decisions. So that was a key part of self-government, and communities were very important.
Darren, pleasure. Terrific book.
It's my pleasure, Fareed. This was fantastic to talk to you.
Two recent events on opposite sides of the Atlantic point to the same problem. In the United Kingdom, the man
Even though systemically, or we'll say on paper, many institutions have said.
I gotta say, this dude
Toronto.
Scott Galloway, like this is something that blows my mind. Why? Like these are thought leaders, the people that hold sway, and they have, you know, ability to persuade. They have the people's ear. And this Scott Galloway, this guy has to be. He's a moron. He is a moron. He has to be the dumbest white man that you know of. Like, seriously, that you know of. I think out of all the white people that you know their name, this guy, white men, this one, he's the dumbest. And we're going to watch this. Like, and there's something, what bothers me the most about him is he thinks, obviously you can tell he really cares what people think about him, but also he thinks that if he just cucks harder, the left will like him more and they'll spare him. If he just throws his own group under the bus harder, progressives will like him more. Seriously, if he cucks harder, like if he just cucks way harder than all the other white guys, he'll be the most beloved white guy in the progressive movement. And it's so transparent, but also he's just not very smart. How did this guy get to any level of notoriety? It's incredible.
Toronto, born and raised, or?
Yes.
No kidding.
Yeah, and we're summertime right now, which is the best time of the year.
Yeah, it's a wonderful. It really is a wonderful city. I think of it as sort of a clean New York. Did your parents immigrate there?
Fat, goofy nose on this guy. And they're almost like horn-rimmed glasses. Like, bro, what is up with you, man?
Or how did you end up in Toronto, or how did your
Weirdo.
parents end up in Toronto?
Yeah, my parents are originally from Malaysia, and I have to say I love New York too. I agree. I tell people all the time Toronto is like a smaller version of New York, and they're always, if they're Torontonians, they tend to be a bit skeptical, but I do love New York. But yeah, they came over here, and yeah, I love the city. I've moved around a bit for school and things like that, but I've always come back.
By the way, congratulations. You're blowing up, for lack of a better term. And I immediately
Didn't know
forwarded to
you're
our
a
producers and
woman,
said we have to
Canuck.
get
Said.
Deborah So on the podcast. I love the work you're doing. The first line of your book, Sextinction, reads, "Society has never been more sexualized, yet we are having less sex than ever before." And one piece of data you cite is that in the United States, 1 in 3 men and 1 in 5 women across all adults, regardless of marital status, report not having had sex in the last year, according to the General Societal Survey. Can you give us a rundown as to why this is happening? What is the sextinction and what's causing it?
Yeah, so thank you for your kind words too. So I had noticed this trend starting in 2016 because that was the first time data had been published showing that there is this decline in sex that was happening across America. And so in that study, it showed it was based on, as you said, that sample of data that is nationally representative of Americans, showing that millennials were the first generation to be showing this very pronounced decline in sexual activity. And this was expected to continue on for Gen Z. And since then, more data has come out consistently showing that there is this trend across the globe. Doesn't matter, as you said, marital status, age cohort, of people having less sex than ever before. And it is most pronounced in millennials.
You know, this less sex studies and stuff, not all changes are bad, actually. Some changes are they're just side effects of change. It's just change. Like, oh, people are having less sex than they used to. Well, does it ever occur to anybody that there wasn't very much to do 100 years ago? Right? Like, maybe there are, we're having less sex because there are more viable activities in competition with sex. Because like she said, even married couples are having less sex. Well, you know what that says to me? That sex isn't the only thing to do anymore. We have other things we can do with our time. And sex, it's not very productive. I mean, like for kids, sure, but you're not actually working towards the future. Sex is great and all, but it's like we live in a productive sort of society. I mean, am I out of line here? Does that strike any of you guys as a salient point? Like, hey, there's just a lot more activities, hobbies, things to occupy us. You know, A- and some of those things, sex is great, but it's like, it's not the alpha and the omega. It's not the end all be all. There are other activities that I like to participate in. I like to recreate. And you know what I'm saying? And and the fact that the sex it's happening across the social structure at all different levels of society, that doesn't strike me as such a bad thing. And also, like the birth rate decline, that's not because people aren't having sex. That's for totally different reasons. It's like 100 years ago in the middle of winter, yeah, there was nothing else to do. So they just had sex. They just had a fire and had sex all winter. Oh, that's not we don't live in that world anymore. No, and I'm not saying bad or good it just strikes me that maybe uh their time could be better spent elsewhere. I don't know.
And Gen Z, and among those generations, among young men in particular. So Sextinction, my book, is about trying to understand why is this trend happening, what is taking the place of sex. And my interest in sexual inactivity is partially because I used to study human sexuality scientifically, but also because it, to me, is a reflection of emotional intimacy and connection more widely. So if people are less interested in having sex, what is taking its place? Why are people less interested? And if this is even happening among married people and people who are partnered up, I don't think that's necessarily a good sign of where we're headed in society. But also, I wrote the book as a guide for parents because we know so much more now about social media and screens and how technology has the potential to really derail young people's development. And in Sextinction, I talk a lot about how I think Gen Z has unfortunately been, to some extent, a guinea pig generation because many of these technologies, they grew up not knowing a world without them. And I don't think parents should be blamed for that. But now that we do know more, hopefully being able to prevent further harm potentially to future generations and to adults as well, because I do think we're also being affected. Just because our brains are more developed doesn't mean we're completely immune to these changes.
So I'm going to put forward a number of theses. I think about this a lot because I believe the most rewarding thing in life is relationships. And sex, which has, you hear the word sex and your brain just starts firing in a lot of different ways. And I think in a lot of ways, people connote sex with something sort of nefarious or not wholesome. But the reality is, sex is a fantastic bridge or on-ramp into a relationship. And if we have less sex, I think it's going to mean we have less connection, less relationships, lower birth rates, and just generally less.
That's another thing about this guy is, like I say, he like cuck harder. He also does this thing where he does it in a really blunt, obnoxious way where he just, without nuance, sort of just says something in the most obnoxious way. You know what I mean? Like, how he says it, you know, I think, men, they just need to do this and that. He just said he picks a really extreme position and just he picks an extreme position and then he just posts up on it, and sort of just stands there. What of it? It's goofy.
Anxiety. I'm less anxious and less depressed when I'm in a relationship. And
And there are these ipsa dixit statements like he provides no evidence, no backup or backing up. He just says it and it's right because he says it. Nah, bro, that's what ipsa dixit means, by the way. It means it's when somebody just sort of, it's a statement, but when they, it's like they exclaim it, basically saying, this is the truth. Ipsa dixit is just sort of when somebody's passing off their own opinion as fact, more or less. It's Rome, or it's a Latin.
not just sex and companionship, but even things like touch. I wonder if we're just touching less. So I want to put forward a number of theses around why this is happening and have you tell me where I'm right and wrong. Technology consolidates a market. It consolidates commerce, Amazon, social media, search, 50 and 93% shares respectively. And mating has become digitized. And as a result, it's become a bit of a winner-take-all economy. And the thesis is there's a small number of people having a lot of sex and the rest having a lot less sex. Where do I have that right and wrong?
I think that's very much true. I mean, I have an entire chapter in Sextinction about dating apps and social media and how that alone has really warped our perceptions. And I can only imagine what it's like to grow up with this technology and not really know what it's like to meet someone and not be able to look them up online and creep them and find out all these things about them. And at the same time, you as a potential single person trying to find somebody, you know that anyone who's interested in you is going to do that to you. So what is the image that you feel you need to project online? So that's a lot of pressure for young kids. The other part of that is, as you mentioned, because it is, I'm not sure if you said this explicitly, but it is a commercial enterprise. So these platforms are incentivized to want to keep you on there. So something like dating apps, it's not really in their best interest to have everyone find someone and end up happily married and never need to use that technology again. So, I mean, I understand that and I respect it. It's, it's a product like anything else. But I think when we outsource our personal lives, and especially things like emotional intimacy and sexual intimacy to these platforms that are not necessarily looking out for our best interests or treating us as individuals who have dreams and the desire to fall in love, that can be potentially very unhelpful and frustrating to people. And I think nowadays, a lot of people are experiencing dating app burnout. So social media too, that's really affected, I would say, how not even, yeah, I mean, there's a huge body of research literature about the effects on how it has detrimentally affected their self-esteem, their body image, both the boys and girls, in terms of body dysmorphia, muscle dysmorphia in young boys, plastic surgery in young girls. Even in Toronto, I see young women all the time walking around. They're teenagers and they have injectables, which is crazy to me. But then the other thing is, so you feel this pressure in terms of your body, but then also, I think adults also are similarly affected by the types of partners they think that they should be pursuing, what they think they need to look like to attract other people, what they think they deserve. The whole trend of looks maxing is based on this erroneous idea that young boys need to look like a super hyper alpha masculine giga chad guy, when most women don't really care that much about what a guy.
I have to push back here on this. Sweetheart, you're wrong. You're wrong. Those boys, clavicular, they're not imagining things. They're not crazy. Those boys are responding to real conditions in real life. Boys don't just bone smash, which I think it's kind of just a ridiculous idea to get clicks, but that they don't even do. But they're responding to a real uh this is a real situation in the world, that they're responding to. And it's like it's kind of condescending. Like, well, who does she think she is? Like, she just kind of waving that away. These co- these guys, this movement on the internet, it's not happening for no reason. Like, how is she just trying to wave that away, pretend that they're crazy and girls don't really want this? Uh, do you use TikTok? Because y- if you scroll through on TikTok, you will see women saying that they want, and even if they don't say they want that, those are the guys that they're going for. Those are the guys that they swoon over. So, and it's her trying to piss down their back and tell them it's raining. Like, no, you are wrong, ma'am. They are right. They're the ones in the trenches. You are in an ivory tower in Toronto somewhere. Get out of here with that.
It looks like yes, you want someone you're attracted to, but for women especially, that handsomeness and that attractiveness is based on many other factors as opposed to just purely how tall you are, how strong is your jawline, how muscular you are. If anything, most women don't want to date a really jacked guy because they find that scary. So
Bro, they say this all the time. Women want a guy that scares them a little bit because he scares other people. He'll protect her. Does she supposed to be like a sexologist? And she's, oh, women don't like those kind of guys because they scare them. What? What? It's absurd. And these are the people that are supposed to figure out these problems. They're going to get us out of this mess, guys. Do you feel saved? Do you feel like you're in good hands when you got Scott Galloway and Deborah So? They're solving the problems.
social media, dating apps, I think, and now we have things like AI chatbots, which I talk about in Sextinction, also pornography, creates this entire ecosystem that I think is a hall of mirrors, and then also offers these potential replacements for in-person sex or in-person connection that doesn't really fulfill us, but they do give this perception of fulfillment. So I think that's also a way for some people, especially if they are struggling in their mental health, to avoid having to go through the trouble of actually getting dressed, going out, working on themselves, having social skills, interacting with people, dealing with rejection, not necessarily getting what they want. And then I have another chapter in Sextinction that talks about biological influences, so things like the birth control pill, potentially.
Something else too there. But she's talking about all the things that men need to do and go through. You know, they need to look nice. They need to put on nice clothes. They need to make an effort, comb their hair, yada yada. The whole spiel. I didn't hear one thing about, like, she even said, they're- they're going to have to get used to rejection. They're going to have to take a lot of licks before anything even happened. I didn't hear one sacrifice that women were going to have to make. Not one. And they wonder why their solutions don't work. because they're not solution. They're living in pretend world. These solutions are not solutions. And like, men are just gonna have to get real. Like, it's all on men. It's just ridiculous.
Low testosterone, environmental toxins that may also be affecting us on a level that we're not fully aware of. And until those things are addressed as well, I don't think we're going to be able to fully fix the issues that we're facing right now with this crisis.
My dad always used to say,
That's what I was gonna say for a second. Uh, and she's talking about all the things men they're gonna have to man up, or and that's fine. I'm not raising hell about that. She says, they're gonna have to get used to rejection and this, that, and the third. He's like, they're not doing it. They're checking out. They're not doing it. And it's like, how about we how about we ask the question, why are they checking out? Why are they tiptoeing around that question? Why is that the one question that none of these people want to talk about? Because it has nothing to do with the guys. That's why. Because the guys are responding to real world stimuli. And if they ask that question, they're going to have to talk about somebody other than their favorite whipping men and boys. These people, they're in the business of solving problems in the academia and intelligentsia, but we live in a society, in a social order, where it is truly, really and truly, only acceptable to criticize one half of the population. Only one half of the population is, allowed to be critiqued. The other half is above suspicion. It's above critique. It's above blame. So and I feel for them. They're in the business of solving problems. Well, the only problems that they can identify are belonging to men. They can only identify the problems that are men's, that only men, it's incumbent upon men to fix. They can't talk about any other problems, because then they would have to critique women. That women would have to be accountable. Women would have to be responsible. So these people, they're kind of put in an impossible position. But at the same time, though, our entire academia and intelligence, like science, is based on truth and asking uncomfortable questions and pushing and finding where the problem is. So the entire institution of science and intelligentsia and academia and universities, it's all a farce. We may as well burn them down, because they're not pursuing science. Because science is fact based. It's about uncomfortable questions and stuff. But they won't ask the uncomfortable questions, because our social order is ideologically captured. You can't do science and ideology at the same time. And that's really that's what why I can't really get on board with any of the stuff these people say, because I know that their foundations are garbage. They're shaky at best. How can you trust any studies, any science that comes out, when you know that they can't even question women. They can't even question something as rudimentary, something as simple as an entire sex. There's only the species is sexually dimorphous. You can't criticize one half. Well, how do you even claim to have any sort of objectivity, any sort of trustworthiness? Like, come on, man.
men get turned on with their eyes and women with their ears. And he said, you need to develop yourself in your rap. And be funny. It's like be in reasonable shape. Be
Man, boy, I hope you guys had your pens and pads out because that little bit of wisdom, man, that men are sexually visual, so and women are whatever he said. So you need to develop your personality, blah blah blah. Like, bro, is oh man, that's just one of his stupidisms,
dresser, but
idiotisms.
it's more about your voice and what you say for men. Let's talk a little bit about venues, and that is
Talk a
generally
little bit
speaking.
about
Again, I want you to
venues.
push back where I have this wrong. But if you talk to couples who've been married longer, 30 or 40 years, 70 or 80% of them will say that one was much more interested in the other in the beginning. There's very rare there's that kind of, romantic moment where someone drops the scarf and they look at each other and they're both in love. That
High school sweethearts, always. Like my parents, that's how they were. When my dad went to the Marine Corps, like my mom had all of his linen, his pillow and stuff. She would like when she missed him, she would like snuggle with his pillow and stuff. Or when she was like ovulating, yeah, she'd be like locked onto his stuff.
typically it's not how relationships play out.
But like there is a certain group of certain relationship, and it's the high school sweetheart and the young where the girl just women they women have the opportunity when they're very young to get their perfect mate on an instinctual level, on a natural level. Like my mom really loved my dad. That is until Sex in the City and the modern culture, but so much so like, that his smell, like and you know what I mean? And she fell in love with him at like 12 or 13. But he could do no wrong. He could do no wrong. And I remember uh as late as like when they were maybe I think about 50 is when they started drifting apart. But before that, like before I was an adult, and they were like one person. I mean, in lockstep. And my mom wouldn't dare go against my dad, and she agreed with him on everything. Like, so I just think they're saying, "Oh, most relationships, the man loves the woman more than." It's like I don't think that's the case, and I don't think that's a healthy. That's not. I don't know if that's gonna last. I heard this the other day, and it rung true to me. But it was um the man has to, and I don't know how true this is, but I thought it had a little ring of truth. But if when a woman is the one that's more in love, and not saying the guy's not in love, but when she's let's say, for lack of a better term, obsessed with the guy, or she's you know he's her focus, she's locked into that. But when the guy is the one, and she's up on the pedestal, the guy's focused on her, she's focused on everything else. Like he's focused on her, and what's she focused on? Not him. Not him. She's focused on what's going on around her. Whereas if she's the one that's focused on the guy, she damn sure isn't focused on any other guy. I mean, and to me, that just has the ring of truth. And I'm not saying that how people will jump to conclusions when you say that, where a woman is in love with a guy, and it's like, well, he better not be abusive. She better have a job. She better blah blah blah. And it's just like, oh my god, is it like a bad thing when a woman is head over heels in love with a guy? Like, do you automatically assume that she's dumb? or that she's like, I hate it. Hate that. Because I remember seeing it when I was a kid growing up. I had friends that like my buddy Brett that I grew up with in my neighborhood. Him and his girlfriend were high school. She, he loved her, but man, she couldn't see other men. And it's so sweet and it's ideal. But I think when a woman loves a guy like that, I think like those are the marriages that last forever. And like that's one of the few instances where you see a woman gets the exact man she wants. And then they don't want anything else. But it's like that's the exception now because our social order tries to get to them quick and talk them out of that. Like I said, my mom was one of these, and it's how love should be because, you know, it's like my dad could do no wrong. So it's like, she didn't punish him for every little thing. It's funny too. Women, they can even love a man's flaws. They can even love a man's hardness or his meanness. It's the craziest thing, but it's not crazy. It's just love. It's actual love. And it's nothing to be sneezed at. If like and I've been that with a woman before. And if you can get that and love that woman, you're you're in good shape.
And usually it was the man that was much more interested in the woman because, just to be frank, men are less choosy. Men feel like they have an obligation to spread their seed to the four corners of the earth. Women have an obligation to put up a much finer filter and pick the strongest, smartest, and fastest seed. And it's the reason why our kids are taller and smarter than we are. But the venues to demonstrate excellence, or a man can demonstrate excellence and valor and go through the courting ritual, which mammals have, where the male tries to impress the female, there's fewer venues to demonstrate excellence. People have remote work. People aren't going to church or religious institutions. 40% of the bars and pubs have been closed in the UK since COVID. So is some or a lot of it just the fact there are fewer places, quite frankly, for men to break through and demonstrate excellence and establish that kind of over time excellence? He was kind to his parents at Temple. He was great at work. He had great friends. He was really funny. I like the way he danced. Isn't a lot of this that we're just not mixing as much?
Yeah, and I would agree with that. And I think I tried to be as fair across the board in terms of pointing out what both sexes are doing right and what they could be doing better. So I would say, in terms of, there's definitely a novel dynamic between the sexes. There's partially this hostility that I see fomented by online content, but also I think post Me Too, that's made things a lot more complicated for both sexes. And I don't blame men for this because I think most young men are understandably terrified to approach a woman in public because they don't want to be labeled a creep. They don't want to potentially be filmed and put on social media or on the internet, have their life ruined forever. And then I also think, like you said, with it's not as, just more generally, can't date at work. It's not as socially normal to talk to strangers anymore. People feel very much like everyone's always on their phone. So those things combined, I think men need to be the pursuers. And like I've found the same thing with couples that are happily married. Usually the man was more interested in the woman and he probably is a little bit more in love with her than she is with him, which is probably not a popular thing to say, but that's generally what I found. And I've talked to lawyers who work in family courts and they say similar things. So I think that is because men naturally need to feel like they're invested in their partner and they need to know that they put the effort in. So if you have a whole generation of young men who are disincentivized from pursuing women because society tells them you don't want to be creepy, you don't want to be a harasser, they're also say if they're struggling with low testosterone, they're lacking not just in terms of their libido, but also their motivation more broadly in life. So one of the, I would say, main reasons why young men do strive to be successful is because those markers of success help to attract women, because women on average tend to prefer partners who have resources, who are as successful or more successful than they are. So if young men are feeling lethargic, they don't have the energy, they don't have motivation or focus, they're not really interested in pursuing goals, that's a turnoff to women. And again, if they're struggling biologically, that's not their fault. But then I also think there's, in our culture and systemically, there's a real push to support young women in their success, almost at the expense of young men. So you have
No shit.
initiatives like diversity that explicitly penalize young men, or men more generally, especially white and Asian men, for no reason other than the fact that they are men. And I've had colleagues.
Isn't it kind of wild that she's batting for white men right here? Like, and it is kind of crazy because, with Asians, we do have common cause with them. when it comes to admissions in school and how we're discriminated against. Like white men and Asian men, we get the same rap through no fault of our own. We've done nothing and we're deprived of opportunity.
Former colleagues in academia tell me that they have come across job postings. I've seen them myself where they explicitly say this person needs to be a minority, either a woman or some other minority status to apply. So basically, men are excluded from these job applications, which is nothing more than discrimination. It's wrong.
How is it that my own country, that my people started, is more concerned about making sure that a small minority of people have more opportunity than I do, and that women should have better and more opportunities and more access to jobs. Like, and I have nothing against women, but the thing is, and we'll get to this, but women have a natural job, and it's a full-time job, and it takes most their life. I'm not mincing anymore. I'm not advocating for women to be in jobs. Raising children is a full-time job, and that's the job that they are meant to do. They know they're meant to do that. They want to do that. But we have a shitty society that is hell-bent on social engineering and trying to change human nature, which is impossible. But women already have a job. It's men that need those opportunities. Women have a job. It's replacing people. It's birthing the next generation. It's nothing against women. I have no problem. But facts are facts. Nature is nature. This has been a fun experiment, and it's been a kind of a quaint little diversion. But it's time to get serious and get our asses back to work and get back to what we're meant to be doing. Get back to doing human things. Get back to living like human beings instead of living like robots, living like sexless, automatons, eunuchs.
So that I think there's this sense that if we care about men or we are sympathetic toward them, that is somehow
Like we need children. We need, how hard, how difficult, how incredibly expensive and how difficult, how much time, how much effort, how much focus it requires to have children and to raise them to healthy, successful adults, healthy, assimilated, uh, and upstanding citizens. It cannot be overstated. And it's extremely expensive. And the only way a woman can do it is when she has a man providing her the means to do it, giving her the space to focus on those kids. That's the point. And that's what motivates men to go out and do things. We are just fighting our own human nature, tooth and nail, hammer and tong with this social experiment. And it's bound to die. But it's like, I'm tired of pretending that nature isn't reasserting itself. Women know that this is the case. They know this, and they know that what I'm saying is right. Most women, the majority, they don't want to go to a job. They want to raise their kids. They want to marry the man of their dreams, have his kids, and spend their life raising those children. Spend their life building upstanding citizens and creating relationships between them and other people, between them and her, them and the father. We're destined for nothing but for failure when we carry on in spite of these facts.
A cost to women. That's a threat to women. Women are going to be sent back to the kitchen, not have equal rights, not be allowed to pursue their careers. But then you also have with this online discourse, because it's become so polarized, and young men today are saying, well, what did I do to deserve this? I have no issue with women. I just don't like being discriminated against. So then you have these influencers come in and say, okay, you guys want someone who tells you you're not toxic and that masculinity is great. We're going to tell you how to be really, dominant and really say discriminate against women, tell them that they have no rights, they just don't deserve equal rights anymore. And then you have the opposite side of that of female influencers saying to young women, see, this is why you can't trust men. This is why men are all sexist and misogynistic. So it keeps going on back and forth and back and forth. So going back to your earlier point, I do think, yeah, it's more important that your partner is kind to you, compassionate, supports you, both of you care about each other, put each other first. Those things like agreeableness and personality factors are much more predictive of success in a marriage. But I also think because people spend so much time online, and the younger generations do, and that's their primary way of meeting people, interacting now, they're being fed this ideology of what they need in terms of how their partner needs to look and how the status that person brings to the table, as opposed to, like you said, is this person, what are they like just on a day-to-day basis? Do you like being around them? Do they make you laugh? Are they nice to people? Can they have a conversation with a stranger? Things like that.
So it feels as if the gulf between connection is getting wider and wider. And so, and this is a wonderful thing, women are ascending. Women no longer, I think, or not nearly as many women feel the economic need to partner. They can take care of themselves, and that's great. And naturally speaking, in a marketplace, as one party increases its game, their expectations should naturally increase. I think that's fair.
Mr. Galloway, Professor Galloway, do you not understand that the human species is built with some constants in mind? There are certain variables that used to be, they went without saying, but there are certain variables that human beings existing need to continue existing. One of those variables is women must rely on men. Women must need men. When women don't need men, it's a broken model. It doesn't work. When women don't need men, they don't have kids. It's that simple. I'm not some, miser, some slave master, something that wants have women at my beck and call, but I understand. I'm not an idiot. Immodestly, perhaps, but I'm not an idiot. And I understand incentives. Having kids, raising a family, it's hard. And it's a very serious step, and it's a big step, and it's irreversible. Women just won't go through with it if they don't have some incentive motivating them. When they need a man to provide for them and to care for them, that's the incentive they need to have children. It's if they don't, if the natural instinct and urge to have kids isn't enough, the need for a man's protection and provisioning is what gets them over the mark. Uh, if they aren't already over it with the urge. But that's not my opinion. That's just the way it is. And think about this. Through all of history, this was never an issue because women always they needed men. There was no other way. So that's what I mean is the human race exists with certain constants in mind. And women's sort of helplessness in wilderness, like, out in nature. Men are helpless too, but like with tigers and whatnot. But that constant is what made sure that reproduction was taken care of. They needed a man for shelter, and a man is going to want kids. Well, he's going to want sex, which is going to lead to kids. But that's a constant, and they've removed it. What makes them think that we can even continue as a species with that removed? That's a rather glaring flaw in all of this. How do you get women to have kids if they don't need to? Huh? Honestly, how do you do it? Nobody's figured it out yet, so it doesn't look like it's going to get figured out. Why would we want to figure that out? What makes us so arrogant as beings to think that we shouldn't have to live the way that we always have, like that we've just, this is the way that works. This is the way that made us what we are. This is the only reason why we're alive, is because women needed men. That's why we're sexually dimorphic. That's why there's a male and there's a female, and they're different. Instead of like dogs where they're the same. We're different. And it's like, why are we so, the fact that, dogs, men or males and females are the same. They're just as strong as each other and everything. But human beings, they're not. Women are weaker than men. That it should be obvious that women being the weaker sex, or being weaker than men, is a necessity of evolution. We wouldn't exist if that wasn't possible. That's why we are in existence. So, why do we think that we get to change the rules or something? Why we don't? We're just fighting our own nature. But it's so arrogant. It's like, who do you think you are? Like, what makes you think that, you're beyond that? We're not. There's nothing we can do about that. But like, if you look at, the simple fact that we are different, you know, to me, the fact that men and women are different, it took effort for that to happen, so it didn't happen for no reason. We have two genders because that's that's the optimal. That's the optimal situation. That's the optimal setting for our species. So why are we determined to sabotage it? Makes no sense. Well, and it doesn't work. It doesn't work. These people, they're fighting reality, just trying to ignore it as long as possible and pretend as though that they can, sort of wish cast this stuff out of existence. You can wish cast it out of existence as much as you can wish cast communism into existence, as much as you can wish cast, thieves out of existence. Like, no, you can't do that. That's something that in us that we can't escape. It's a part of us.
And men, simply put, need to level up in terms of their own plan, their own economic viability, their own emotional viability, their physique, their dressing, making an effort, being creative, just showing up, making an effort, leveling up. And I think a lot of people would agree men aren't leveling up at the same pace that women are leveling up. So it's understandable to think that women might complain there aren't enough economically and emotionally viable men out there. At the same time, and I want you to critique both of these assertions, women's expectations because of online. What I keep seeing online when you have these women talking about is I keep hearing 6 feet, 6 figures. Like that is the bare minimum. Like they're being reasonable. Of course, 6 feet, 6 figures. And if you take out married men, obese men, men over the age of 50, it's like 8% of the population. So do you agree that one, men aren't leveling up at the same rate that women are leveling up, creating just a gulf in qualifications or quality? And two, at the same time, women's expectations have become somewhat unreasonable, therefore just creating a gulf of expectations that is not breached or crossed.
I read about the 3/6 rule in Sextinction, which you mentioned. You mentioned 2 of the 3/6. I think you maybe are trying to be polite and not mention the third one, which is has to do with size down below.
Anatomy, yeah.
So,
Mackenzie.
so yeah, women. There's this essentially this lore, I guess, or perspective that women should seek out a man who is a top tier male specimen in terms of his height, how much money he makes, his supposed ability to fulfill you sexually. Although I will say that it's not necessarily length. Other factors matter. This has been documented by the scientific research.
It's funny.
But I do think women should be allowed to what they want to what they want. And there is an evolutionary or a historical reason why women have these preferences somewhat ingrained in them, in that, yes, someone who is taller than you, a partner who is taller than you, can physically protect you. He probably is going to be a more successful provider as well. So the 6 figures annual income speaks to that. And I guess the sexual fulfillment has to do with you being happy in the relationship. But at the same time, it's gone a little bit off course because those are not really metrics, as I mentioned earlier, that are going to point to relationship or marital success long
Yeah,
term.
or
And
happiness.
there are surely plenty of men out there who do meet these 3/6s who are still jerks.
Right? Like the goal is happiness. And somehow young women have equated a six-pack, you know, hung like a Shetland pony, 6 feet tall and 6 figures means they'll guaranteed be happy. Like, no, not even close. But you're still gonna have to work your ass off. It's still gonna be hard work. Like break your back work.
Who are not going to necessarily be husband material. So you take this issue, and what I want to say too is that when you have the influencers, right, these, say, manosphere type influencers who are pointing to hypergamy and saying, see, this is why all women cheat. This is why women can't be trusted. This is why women have, quote, delusional standards. I'm thinking, but it's no different from men having their standards in terms of men tend to want to date women who are younger and who are attractive and who are symmetrical, because these are all indicators of fertility and reproductive health. So I think both sexes should be allowed to want what they want. I'm just, you asked for criticism, so
agree.
I'm trying to push back on these ideas from whatever angle I can. But I do think it's gone to the point where it's so unrealistic now for both sexes. But combine that with the fact that women are excelling in terms of their same age peers. So women are doing better in terms of education and occupation. So there is a smaller pool of viable men, viable, successful men for these women to choose from. So all women are basically fighting over the same pool of the smaller pool of men, because men don't tend to care as much about a woman's success. It doesn't matter how successful a woman is; she's going to be fighting after the same pool of men. And then the vast majority of men who are not as successful have basically been shut out of the dating market, and so now they're going down the route of these other replacements like the chatbots, the sex robots, and sex dolls, pornography. And instead of society recognizing that there's a problem here and that we should stop discriminating against men, we should try to tone down this animosity between the sexes. It's saying, okay, we're just going to give you guys, quote, solutions. So we're going to tell women, okay, if you want to say have a family, you want to get married and have a family, not to say that everyone has to do this, but if you do choose to, for women, our biological window is much more unforgiving than men's. So if you get to a certain age and you don't have a man with whom you'd like to have a child, now society is saying, let's normalize this idea of women having children on their own, like basically electively having children on their own, which I can imagine for many women, if you get to a certain age and you'd like to have a child and you don't have a partner, it's not my place to judge someone who decides to do that. But I also think, ideally, I think it'd be preferable for anyone who would say that it's easier to have 2
I'm the
parents as
child of a
opposed to one
single
child.
mother. Let me just be clear. It's harder. I
Mhm.
experienced it. It's harder to raise a kid on your own.
Hmm. And I think also for the children, like they ideally would have both parents in their life as well, as opposed to being brought into a situation where it's, by design, single motherhood, and society saying, almost encouraging women, freeze your eggs at a young age so that you have all the time in the world. Well, this is the narrative, that you have more time, say, so you can focus on your career, which is great. But they don't. My sense is the messaging is not so much this really should be a last resort, and you should still prioritize trying to find
Yeah.
somebody, because again, this is not a sure bet that it's going to work. So I think reproductive tech, I have a chapter on that. Again, I think if people find it helpful for them, that's their right. I'm not judging anyone, but it's more that these are band-aid solutions and they're not addressing the real problem. And unless we address the root problem, it's only going to get worse. And so, and also with the men, to basically say, okay, well, let's just let you guys have your sex robots and your sex dolls, and you can go off, and as long as you're, having your orgasm and you're not bothering anyone and you're not lighting anything on fire or destroying things, then we'll just ignore you and let women continue succeeding. I don't think that's good for society either. And also, women want, as I said, to date men who are successful. So
It's like I don't think this is good for that's good for society either. It's like, yeah, obviously we're dying. Obviously. It's just, I don't know, it's kind of, it seems goofy to me, is like they still think it's like they're trying to bargain with God. Like people do when somebody in their parent dies or their wife dies or their kid dies, they try to bargain as though they're in a position to argue. And it's like, they're saying, oh, we'll just leave you to your this, that, and the other, and women will continue succeeding. It's like, no, they won't. Or maybe a generation will, but like they're gonna those successes, they're not gonna be recreated because those women are dying alone with no kids. But all these fictions and these fantasies that basically the whole social order they're talking about, its days are numbered. They're numbered. And we're just waiting for this crap to pass because it's unsustainable. Obviously, it's unsustainable. And they are pretending as though it's gonna last for 1,000-year Reich, 1,000-year Reich, and that we need to uh, uh we need to bargain with them. We need to accept their terms. It's like, no, nature's reasserting itself. Like men don't actually have to do anything because eventually all this shit will collapse and then you'll be right back asking for help. Then you'll be right back in need. So men backing out really is them. That's the minority vote, as it were. That's men saying, we'll see how long this edifice lasts for without our participation. We'll see how long you know, your girl bossing it up, how many generations into the future you get, sweetheart. And I'm being a smartass about it, but really though, it's not working. We can all see it's not working. Everybody's miserable. It's like, how about we just let this fiction die, and then we'll just do things the old-fashioned way, the way that works. We'll go back to what we know works. Hmm? We could do that, right? We could always do that. I mean, we live in a world right now where women are afraid to say, I just want to have kids. I don't want to work. I just want to have kids barefoot in the kitchen. Women are afraid to say that. They're afraid to express their own natural instincts, their own natural urges. That isn't unholy. And if that isn't an indictment of a social order, I don't know what is. When a woman's beautiful and most natural inclination is shamed, does that society deserve to exist? Does that society even deserve to say that they care about humanity in any way at all? Because it strikes me that feeling, that or instinct that women can express, that to me might very well be the most beautiful thing about humanity. To be honest, I there you couldn't come up with an idea or with a sentiment that I could or that I would feel was more meaningful. I mean, it really is the most beautiful thing ever. And it's so heartwarming. Like on my dad's side in Michigan, they live in a little farm town, and all my female cousins, that's how they are. And it's like when you see a woman that expresses those sentiments, it's like God is in that woman. Like, seriously, God is in that woman. There's nothing, to my mind, it's it is more beautiful than that. And it's like noble and altruistic and so human because like encapsulated in that and encapsulated in women is like an infinite supply of nurturing and caring that can be brought to bear, can be marshaled on behalf of that urge, that natural instinct to have children. I mean, women, they have a bottomless well of love and emotion and care, caring that they can draw from. And it seems like it's limitless and it's beautiful. And it like this is just the most godless and God forsaken and and deserving of destruction. I mean, of maybe any society. And I think it's worse because we have so much advancement. How is it that we've advanced? As we advanced, we started killing babies. Infanticide. You know, when they used to talk about how Sparta, when a woman would give birth to a deformed child, how they would just throw it off a cliff. You know, they just throw the baby off the cliff, and people, rightfully so, lynched. Shrunk from that in disgust. It's barbaric, and we're no better than the called Hannibal Barca. The forget what the other empire was called that used to fight with Rome, and the General Hannibal. But that's what they did. They sacrificed their children to some god, and Rome rightfully slayed them for it. Good night, Zed. Yeah, what the hell? How am I forgetting? Carthaginians. There we go. Yeah. Yeah, I knew that. It wasn't gonna escape me for much longer. But yeah, they were children sacrificing. They had a religion. We're no, we're the same. We're no better. And women's success is built upon the dead bodies of their unborn children. I don't know if it was Moloch, but I know it was a it was that they were a religion of child sacrificers. But we're no better. Every woman that every successful woman out there, her success is built upon the dead bodies, the fetuses of her unborn children, and everybody knows that. We all know this because women have to sacrifice their children to have a career. What's evil is that our society puts women up to it. It puts them up to do it, like and encourages them to sacrifice, like, 'cause they're going to have sex regardless. But when they want to have a career and they're pushed to it, they have to get abortions. And they have to be willing to sacrifice their kids. They've been put up to it, but that's that's why it all really begs destruction. Like, even if it doesn't work, still it's wrong and it needs to stop. It's evil. so evil. It's not meant to be. It's not right. It's it's like synthetic. It's fake. It's not natural. It's totally unnatural. In our society, it's not going to work until we stop doing this. we're not going to. We're not even going to have a future as a people until we stop. And it's crazy how these people, they still want to defend this. It's like because their success is tied up in this stuff. So as long as they're alive, they're going to defend it.
I would ask women in this audience. I've got a lot of pushback about sex distinction from young women saying, "Why should we care about young men, or why should we care about men? You know, men have done us dirty for so long."
Could you imagine a more short-sighted and selfish and egocentric uh a- oh, it's an owl? That's what they do at the Bohemian Grove. It's a big ass owl.
It's time that they get a taste of their own medicine. But that's
Listen to
really
this.
not a very one positive outlook. But also, it's going in the end do you in, because don't you want to eventually find someone and fall in love? And if
Language. Watching now.
I mean, can you believe that?
Don't.
These women say men have been oppressing us for decades. What? What are you talking about? Like, that's ridiculous. That's so ridiculous. Oh, having kids is being oppressed, is it? It's like, would you say that cavemen oppress cave women? Like, honestly. And when do they oppress those women? Is it between being mauled by a saber-toothed tiger and hunting down a woolly mammoth that breaks their neck? I mean, it's like, how can you they were in survival mode. Like they, they were their fucking average death or age was like 30. Oh my goodness. We've been oppressed for decades. What are you talking about? Like what?
Drink. And what I've said, and I've got a lot of pushback
As
for
if
this,
they were
but it's alcohol
slaves or
ruins a lot of
something.
lives. If you have addiction, you should be very careful. But I have found, generally speaking, that alcohol can play a productive role in overcoming inhibition, in establishing initial contact, establishing initial physical contact, and that leads to physical intimacy and relationships. And I'm not suggesting everyone go out and start doing tequila shots. This innovation in history isn't vaccines or the iPhone. I think it's the American middle class.
Ah,
And only 40% of men throughout history, I understand, have reproduced, and 80% of
mm.
women. The majority of men throughout history have not had the opportunity to reproduce because the majority of the spoils have gone to a small group of people. And they can.
Remember, all of this social engineering has been done under the guise of progress, of social progress. It's important. Not to use the bathroom, but listen close. I'll be right back.
Engage in what I would loosely refer as portia polygamy. And then after World War II, we created this amazing thing called the middle class, where we had a bunch of 7 million men returned from overseas. They were handsome, they were fit, they looked good in a uniform, National Highway Transportation Act, GI Bill, and we made them economically viable and, quite frankly, attractive, and they started mating a lot. And now it appears with income inequality, we're moving back to the way the world has been throughout most of history, and that is a small number of men have a disproportionate amount of mating opportunities, and the rest have almost none. Isn't where we're headed back to, quite frankly, the way the world has been through 99% of history, and we're moving away from what was an anomaly, a wondrous anomaly, where someone of perfectly average attractiveness as a male could expect to find a mate and enjoy that. But aren't we headed to something that has been more normal than not throughout history?
yeah, so the
Oh, anybody find that kind of funny right there? All of this shit has been done under the guise of progress. Listen to that. So we made progress as a species. We get to the point where the vast majority of American men got married, had children, raised a family, and died still married. And that was achieved. Like the American dream. That was a dream that everybody could achieve, that was in everybody's reach. We finally get to that point, and then they say, you know, this isn't good enough. Yeah, we know that we just went from 80% of men dying without having children, and now we're in the most prosperous time. We have rapid advancements because men are motivated, because they all have families. But we could up the GDP. We could double our GDP if we got those women to go to work. But I say all that to say this. They've done all this in progress, and now they're telling us. Now, did you hear what he just said? He says we are moving into we are going from a period where the vast majority of everybody got married and had kids, and the only people that didn't have kids were the people that couldn't have kids. And we're moving to a place where, again, 80% of men will not have kids. And that's literally a state of nature. And, there's nothing to be worried about here. This isn't a big deal. This is just how things used to be. Like, who gives a fuck about progress? I mean, women are successful, don't you know? Like, who cares if both men and women, in the vast majority, 90-something%, all get to have kids? Who cares if we're moving from that model? Who cares, Fuck those guys. Fuck them kids. We want these women working. And these are supposed to be progressives? These people? This guy just tried to pass off some of the most diabolical regression. Like, this guy, he's so stupid. Like, I can't even believe it. He's trying. It blows my mind because, people are fucking pissed, rightfully so. Everybody's fucking parents had kids. Everybody. None of us, though, huh? And this guy is trying to tell us to just, well, that's just the way it's going to be. So this is the price of women going to work. Okay. Well, remind me why I should work to keep the society running. Remind me why this is in my best interest to participate. Why this is in my best interest to not turn to a arsonist. I mean, honestly, it's like, bro, are you trying to stir up a revolution with saying crap like that? Like, and they're supposed to be, they're only, they only care about progress when they get to stomp on us. That's when they care about progress. But when the regression only hurts us, then they like it, apparently. But and these people think that this society has a future. You're fooling yourself. This society has zero future. It's going nowhere. It shouldn't go anywhere. It's not a good society. A lot of the changes that we've accepted, they weren't smart. It wasn't a good idea. And it just blew my mind when this guy said this, and I'm thinking, bro, you're a fake. You're a phony. All of you progressives are fakes and phonies. You're full of shit. You don't care about progress. And that's the last time that I'll be lectured by a leftist or a progressive talking about healthcare and progress and this and that. You know, bro, fuck healthcare. How about I get a fucking wife and kids in a house? Like, how about that is an attainable ambition for young men. Fuck you and your healthcare. Why should people accept this regression? They want us to accept it because they're successful because of it. You know, of course they're going to fight tooth and nail because it keeps them in power. Like Scott Galloway, it gives him some ridiculous credibility that's a joke at best, a jest at best.
Thing is, with this smaller pool of men who are succeeding in society, they have their pick of the lot in terms of potential partners. So they will set the terms in their relationship with regard to how soon they expect to have sex, whether they're allowed to have sex with other partners, whether their partner is allowed to have sex with other people or not, because which you'll commonly see with some very high status men. And I don't necessarily agree with this, just to be clear, but they will say, I'm allowed to sleep with whomever I want. You can only have sex with me, to their female partner. And if she's not okay with that, he says, fine, I'll just go find someone else who will be okay with that. So the other thing is, what you will see is that some men will say start a family with one woman and then go on and have multiple marriages and multiple families. So it's not as though it's not necessarily, I guess, polygamy, but it's somewhat in succession as opposed to simultaneously. And so, you know,
I'll never get this. What is the big, what is all the butthurtedness about, women with a guy and the guy having multiple women? Like, it's like this, it's like an envy or a resentment. I'm not advocating that men should have 5 wives and a bunch of families, but it's like, I just don't get it. It's like women don't even want multiple partners. Like, that's not their thing. And like, men are set up for that. I mean, at least to a degree. And women aren't. It's like, why is there this sense of jealousy? Why is there this sense of resentment? First of all, I could never do that. Never have done that. I'm just, that's not me. I'm not in, like, one is enough. Seriously, one is enough. But, I've always, I have a pretty good discipline with my appetites. Like, and I'm not greedy. You know what I mean? Like, I just want one woman. Like, that's good enough for me. The rest, it's just inviting headache. You're just gonna end up getting stabbed or your tire slashed or some shit. But I just don't get it. Why is there this like intense hatred that men have it this way when women don't even want it that way? It's like, but it pisses them off though. They want men to not be able to do that too. It's like, well, men and women are different. Don't you think men would like to have children themselves? Wouldn't that be nice? Yeah, well, we can't. Sorry. That's the way it works. But it's like women, all they can think about is what they don't have. They don't think about what men don't have. They don't think of, it's like, you get to birth kids. So allow us the one, oh goodness, we can have 3 or 4 women. Oh, it's so great. Spare me. Just wish they could grow the fuck up. Just grow up. Like, why is everybody always so concerned about what everybody else is getting in?
I don't think there are really any winners. I suppose you could argue that the men in these positions
would
are the
agree with
winners,
him.
but it's not really great for the women who are involved or the men who are not able to access any sexual partners. But I would say the thing that's different in the modern or contemporary environment is that now we have this animosity between the sexes where men and women who can't find anyone say, actually, I'm better off like this. Actually, I don't need the opposite sex. Women are doing so well, they just make their money. They say, okay, if I want a family, I can do it on my own. Nowadays, having a boyfriend is, quote, embarrassing anyway, right? That's what mainstream news is saying. And then the men are saying, well, I've got my replacements, my sex robot, she doesn't talk back to me. She doesn't.
I don't get why they're so obsessed with the robots. That isn't going anywhere. That stuff is stupid. It's garbage. It's literally, this is what it is. I've noticed this lately. It's a talking point that all of the red pill and all of these shills, that this is what they hang their hat on, is they get men and women to hate each other. They love talking about it because it's something new, something different. But those shills, they are keeping this crap alive, like the AI. That stuff isn't going anywhere. And they're missing it, the whole thing. This paradigm, this current social paradigm, it's going to collapse. It's not natural. It's as unnatural as communism. It will collapse. They are trying to pick winners like communism. They've set up a society that makes men and women, everybody thinks they're the exact same. And that women at 18 years old, they should plan their life exactly like a man that's 18 years old. They should plan for it to have a career, this, and this. They should pretend as though they are men. That's what our society advocates. That's what it pushes girls to do. And then they hit 30 years. It's all good until they hit 30. And they're like, oh, crap, I'm not a man. And that's from what I understand. And in women, there's not a whole lot of difference until either a woman has a kid or they hit 30. But once a woman has a kid, like as they say, oh, you can have a career just like a man and this and that. And then women, they do that. Then they have a kid. And then they realize, wow, my career means absolutely nothing to me. You can set the whole thing on fire for all I care. That's men. Whereas the man, like the wife has the kid, she leaves work, has the kid. When a man, his kid comes into the world, he doesn't have the instinct to nurture, doesn't overtake him or overwhelm him. The instinct to get his ass to work, put his nose to the grindstone, and succeed. That's the urge that hits the man. The urge that hits the woman is, oh my God, I need to be with this helpless being 24/7. And it's beautiful and natural. When a baby comes into the world, women have their instinct to take care of the child, and the men immediately have their instinct to provide for the woman so that she has the ability, she has the resources and the space to raise a child well and properly. She has the money, the house, the shelter, the protection, and the time. And that's the urge that a man gets when he has a kid. And it's a beautiful thing. Why is our society hell bent on just leveling everything, getting rid of any differences? It doesn't matter what they try to do with the social engineering. It doesn't work. We know the truth in the end, and we can't change the way we are. All we can do is move forward with our own instincts and nature in mind. We know what it is, it's instinctual for us to do. Why do why do our elites insist on going? It's like we're going upriver. We're trying to get to the spring, and we're fighting this current and wondering why. Oh, we're going to be extinct in less than a century. Dude, why don't you just go with the flow? Why must you fight the stream?
nag me. She doesn't talk about things I don't want to talk about. So there's that difference. And I think also if at a biological level, we are being disincentivized to essentially mate, young women who are, say, on the birth control pill, that's affecting their sexual psychology. And then young men, if they're not motivated to want to go out and pursue partners, those are factors that are going to suppress sexual inclination. Even if, let's say in the past, people were not experiencing these things, so they're more inclined to say, I don't like my situation, I want to make things better, I do want to find someone, and so I'm going to work on myself, or I'm going to do what I need, or maybe we'll overthrow the current rulers so that we can get what we want, as opposed to now, it's very much this indifference to a person's situation or a preference for it.
So I coach young men, and I want you to coach me and make me a better coach. And I find the first thing when we start outlining, I'm like, give me your goals, 1, 3, and 5 years, and let's reverse engineer a series of actions to get you to that goal, starting with today. Let's work it all the way back to today. What do you need to do to get there? And the first thing, often the most cited goal, is I want to move out of my parents' place. I want to get my own apartment. So that's a money thing, right? We can figure that out. And that's mostly about starting. Don't be a snob about what job you deserve to start making some money. The second thing is if you get to know them and they start to trust you, it's always the same thing. I'd really like a girlfriend, right? I can tell the moment they sort of trust me and they look around and they're embarrassed to say it, I'd really like a girlfriend. And in addition to some of the things around, all right, let's talk about why women are attracted to men. We need to work on those things. But I find a lot of it is a willingness to endure rejection, what I call your mojo, and to get out there. And I sit here, I'm in Los Angeles, and I can see UCLA from my hotel. And when I was at UCLA, the only way to get a reasonable facsimile of sex was to either go to your parents' house and watch Cinemax or to find an old Playboy in your dad's garage. There was just a lot of
Yeah, that was my first instinct. Hey, sorry to interrupt it, but I just saw you guys' comments. When I see the robots and stuff, I in, on its face, I reject it. I know that that's not happening. People crave, like, when I think about how it presents itself to me, I don't even think of a person. I think of a woman's skin. I don't know why, but I think of a woman's skin like her thigh or, you know what I mean? Like, I think of like grabbing her hip, like the way a woman feels. That's what that's what I miss. That's what is always kicking around in my head somewhere. And I'm just not interested in I mean, AI, I've had great conversations with it, but it's not a woman. It's not another human. It's not as good as talking to my little brother or somebody, like, is it, is intelligent. But in the robot thing too, it's not even it's it's but a mooncast shadow to real human interaction, to a real woman. And I would imagine for women, real man. It just, yeah, it's so lacking that I, no, I don't even want to, say that it's even an attempted replacement. It's not even close. I won't even call it that. You know what I mean? Like, it's just so not it. Not even close. And why would we do that when the real thing is there? Like, it's like, why would we opt for some some made up, package, shrink wrap piece of hunk of shit made in China over a beautiful, you know, blonde or brunette white woman? Oh, what? Like, you're fucking out of your mind. You're out of your mind. But it's like I said, it's just these stupid influencers. They're a bunch of morons. Part of the problem too.
friction, and it wasn't that good a facsimile of sex. And if I had 24/7 lifelike porn available to me on every screen, I think I probably would have been less likely to go on campus and take risks and try and initiate contact with strange women that might ultimately result in a dialogue, a relationship, going out together, and someday maybe sex in a relationship. And so I talk about modulating porn. And that is, I think it's unfair to tell a young man to like go cold turkey. I don't know if that's realistic, but just keep, anything that reduces that fire is going to reduce your ability to get out. Talk about, and I found there's just a total lack of peer-reviewed research around porn because I don't think many academics you might have a view or want to be known as a porn professor.
Ugh,
But talk about the
good
role that
point.
adult content plays in reducing young men's fire, if you will, to get out there and take those sorts of risks.
Right. So when you have an orgasm, it floods you with feel-good hormones that help to deal with stress, help to put you in a better mood, but it also sedates you to some extent. And like you said, it can diminish someone's motivation. And so historically speaking, it benefited men to be sexually frustrated because that would drive them to want to go out and do things, build things, have show productivity, because that is what women found attractive. So in order to get an orgasm, I mean, there's always masturbation, but the thing is, porn provides this um, very remarkably realistic depiction of sex, especially online pornography today, is pretty much like you're watching other people in real time. It's not like magazines back in the day. And I used to write for a very well-known men's magazine that features nude women. So my views on porn have changed a lot since the start of my journalism career. But when you have an orgasm looking at porn, it activates the same brain network that is activated during sexual activity. So it is basically like having sex to some extent, or you are being tricked into feeling as though you're insanely realistic. It scared me how realistic it is. Insanely realistic. It scared me how realistic it is.
Yeah,
So
sorry about that.
you don't have to go through that process. And so the next time a man is sexually
Cool.
frustrated, he can simply say, why am I not just going to go take out my phone and take care of it that way, instead of going through this long process? And then on top of it, because it's so hyper competitive nowadays, unless he is one of those super successful men, it's so hyper competitive for him to get a chance. And he doesn't know if the woman he approaches, if she's going to be disgusted and angry at him, and potentially he's going to have a really bad reaction from her. Although I don't think most women are like that. I think that that's a small segment of women who are just, very, we'll say, dysregulated. But I would say for young men, I mean, I've said previously to try to cut it out entirely. I think it depends on how old you are and how much it's detrimentally affected your life, because I do think porn is probably affecting more people negatively than we are talking about in society. I think porn has become such a common, socially acceptable vice. It's so, I mean, it's
Well, and really, the hell? Oh, really, to me, the thing with porn is they have our politicians, our elites, they have totally left us open and defenseless to the predation of these businesses. It's like as the internet came about, these porn companies and websites, they just paid off politicians. And now they get to feed off of the American people like lawyers used to. They get to be parasites. And they're rich and they get to shit on the little people that they're enslaving. It's so despicable. Like our elite, they are diabolical.
essentially I talk about how softcore pornography imagery is basically everywhere. It's in ad campaigns, it's music videos, it's
Euphoria.
entertainment shows. Yeah. I
Everywhere.
mean, it's everywhere. It's not really shocking. But the strange thing is that young people are seemingly disinterested in it. And so when you can I think that's also because, again, being exposed at such a young age, it's not really something that's taboo or sexy even anymore. So if you can, I mean, just try it for 30 days for young men. If you sense that it may be affecting you negatively, it's worth trying. And again, it's probably gonna be very difficult, especially if it's something that you've become so used to relying on for sexual gratification. But I can also say from conversations I've had with many young women that they can usually tell if a guy they're with has watched a lot of porn based on how he interacts with them and, to be honest, how he performs in bed. And he may not be aware. So that's just another thing to mention. And I'm not trying to shame men for this or shame women for this, but just to say, be aware that what you consume on a daily basis or regular basis.
And then do the same thing for women you would coach.
All right. So I would say
So if you were to, I want to go very micro and then macro. I want to talk about advice for young men and women and then policy. If you were to speak to men or coach young men and women, as far as I know, you may do this, and say, all right, let's just talk more broadly that you're interested in having a relationship and some sort of physical intimacy might be a step to a relationship. What advice, general advice, would you give to men who say, I am interested in figuring out a way to establish a relationship? What are they doing wrong? What do they need to do less of, more of? And then do the same thing for women you would coach.
All right. So I would say I'll start with the young women. I would say if you are looking for a man to have a
Here,
positive
here. Here, here, cheer mixes. I like that. Here, here. Second the motion.
mindset, I think this
And that's kind of something I was thinking earlier was they keep saying how men are just gonna have to take rejection and get used to rejection and this and that. And it's like, why can't women bear some of this burden? Like, maybe it would help. Maybe, like, I'm not saying that, oh, I'm not just being like spiteful or, screw women. It's like, no, no, maybe it would bridge the gap. You know what I mean? Like, why are they just adamant that women can't be asked to do anything? We're in this great age of change where they want to change everything. Women work, this, that, the other. They want to change everything except this. They want to change everything except stuff that would put anything on women's shoulders. For they want all the stuff they've changed is the stuff that would, it's freedom for women and this, that, and the third. But when it would actually benefit the whole, everybody, no, 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 we cannot put any responsibility or obligation on women. No. And it's just like, what the fuck? You don't even like ask if it'll work, or maybe there's no talk of that being in the solution ever, ever. It's like, man, we're not going to succeed like this. We are not going to succeed like this. They're ignoring, and it's not even that I'm saying that we need to put stuff on women's shoulders. They won't, but I'm saying they won't even say it. Like, we can't even have the conversation. Like, hey, if it doesn't help, then it doesn't help. Like, I'm not going to harp on it. But fuck, we can't even explore. We can't even explore that. And that's why this will never succeed, because they're not genuinely looking for solutions. They're the only solutions they're concerned with are the ones that are over here. Those ones over there, no. But it's like, shouldn't any solution be acceptable? Are we not looking for a solution to a problem? Or am I just out of line, or am I missing something, or am I just fucking slow? I don't know. I get the feeling that these people are just morons and just happy to have something to talk about that doesn't require them to answer for anything, or like, that's the feeling I get from it.
applies to both, but just to have a very open approach or perspective of the opposite sex. There was a poll that came out recently. I wrote about this for the Globe and Mail, and I wrote about online radicalization in young women and how actually among young women, so they looked at Gen Zers between the age of 18 and 30, and they found that more young women actually have a negative view of the opposite sex than do young men. And this is especially pronounced in young women age 25 and younger. It was only, I believe, a third of women under the age of 25 had a positive view of men, whereas with men, it was closer to something like 70%. So I think there is a huge chunk of young women out there who hate men, and that's going to make dating very difficult. Just like if you're a man who hates women, it's going to be very difficult. But so that alone, having a positive.
Well, it really doesn't matter. Those people are a non-issue. They hate men. Well, they're out of the gene pool. So what? Fuck 'em. If they want to, destroy any, or live some pathetic existence like that, let them. Let them. They're not bothering me. I don't give it. I mean, they're only hurting themselves. It's like, if they hate men, they hate humans. They hate people. Period. Men, like men and women, neither one of them are the humans. They're both the humans. They're the same. Their genetics are the exact same. They're just different representations of it. And anybody who is that low IQ, I mean, that is low IQ. Hating the opposite sex, fuck, you are low IQ. I pity you.
Outset about the opposite sex is going to do wonders for you. I would say also to just, in terms of your body language, your facial expressions, be very friendly when you're out in public. Smile if you see a man whom you find attractive. Smile very widely. I love to cite the study showing that a part of the brain called the medial orbital frontal cortex activates when someone sees an attractive face, and it activates even more strongly when that face
Yeah, I see just so much. I don't like to use the words misogyny, misandry, because that's hate, but I'll call it a bias.
of
I
women.
want
And if you
kindness.
behave that way,
Yeah.
yeah, if you behave that way, you're going to only attract a certain type of woman. And then these men, unfortunately, don't understand why they keep attracting the same type of women. But I would also say just to think more broadly in terms of your past relationship.
Did she just say these men don't understand why they're attracting the wrong type of women? What about all the women that don't understand why they're attracting the wrong kind of men? All the women that say, where are all the good men and this and that? It's so funny how they only have this energy for men. But it's like, we all know that there is a lot of women out there, just as there's a lot of men that don't, and this is more of a woman thing, but where they just pick bad men. Their taste in men is not smart. It's for like drug dealers or criminals or losers. And you don't hear anybody saying that like to them, like, well, it's because you're the guys you like. They're bad. They're crappy spouses. They're crappy men, crappy humans.
And not to blame or hold the opposite sex accountable for things that your exes may have done to you. Because that's another theme I see. People tend to get really down on themselves about relationships that didn't work out.
I agree with you, Roisin. That's what I'm saying is when I'm talking about this, it goes without saying that men are going to improve and they're going to be expected to improve. So when I say that about women, that's all I'm saying is, can't we, can, why aren't they included in the conversation? Why can't they be a part of the solution too? Why is it that men have to be the solution to everything, the end all be all? It's crazy. And the thing is they don't acknowledge reality and nature and instinct until it suits them, until it's men and that men's their natural way of being and instinct and this and that, blah, blah, blah. Then they love it. But when it comes to women, women are just as good as men. They're just like men. Not just as good. I don't mean to compare that way, but they're the same. There's no differences. It's absurd.
And they assume that that's going to be the continued pattern going forward.
Yeah, I see just so much. I don't like to use the words misogyny, misandry, because that's hate, but I'll call it a bias. And I find the incel movement is men just giving up and leaning into really unfortunate biases against women and these myths that women's success has been inversely correlated to their decline and that it's women's fault.
Bro, you heard that, right? Women's success. It's basically saying men have been complaining that it's a zero-sum game. They've been complaining it's a zero-sum game. Now, watch this. 1 second.
Before, I think we need to do away with diversity initiatives, which makes me very unpopular. But I do think that's the only way you can be fair. Even though systemically, or we'll say on paper, many institutions have said that they will not do this, but they still do it behind closed doors. They just are not as flagrant about it.
I know this firsthand. I know there's informal affirmative action for men now at universities because they're having trouble finding men to apply. I just want to, I agree with you around DEI, but I do think there's room for affirmative action. I think it should just be based on income, not gender or ethnicity. I think there are some people who deserve a hand up, but you're right, it is a sensitive topic. But look, in college, it's 60-40 female to male. And anyways, I agree with you, but I think a lot of universities, University of California did away with DEI in 1997. They have what's called an adversity index. They say, look, if you grew up in Appalachia and your dad's imprisoned and your mom's a meth head, we're going to take that into account. But just
I feel
being
like maybe
non-white,
Before I think we need to do
say
away
the
with diversity
second
initiative
half.
around her killing men. And she has said
Yeah,
publicly
listen to
that. And so I think they're two sides of the same coin. And unfortunately, what I find is there's a bias in terms of not just what's acceptable in mainstream discourse. So you can rag all day about how much you hate men and men are trash and men are terrible and unalive all men, say hashtag unalive all men. And then if you say anything like that about women, understandably, that's not allowed. You know, you'll get banned from social media or people call you out or call you a misogynist. I think it should be not be allowed across the board. That's like, that's hateful across the board. You should not be able to, one, generalize an entire
well, the
class of
future is
people.
female. Can you imagine saying the future?
pretty crazy that's outrageous what she's saying. That we should hold everybody the same standard. Isn't that crazy? Like how is it that people even pretend that this is a liberal democracy and that our society is worth a shit, worth a hoot in hell? It isn't. There's no kids. This society, man, it's just rotten.
Is male. It's just
Well,
entirely different.
The other thing I was going to say is with feminism, I do think at the core, feminism did a lot for women, and I'll always be grateful for that. But at the same time, contemporary feminism has gone so far that it basically advocates for discriminating against men,
Oh, shit.
hating men. And so I really feel for young women who have been indoctrinated in this way, especially
Isn't
I'd say
that
with
crazy? Feminism advocates for hating young men and it damages young men, and she feels for young women that have been indoctrinated in it. Isn't that something? An ideology that hates men. She pities the young women they're indoctrinated into. Indicative of our society. I mean, that's representative of a society as a whole.
the education system, mainstream media. There's one very popular pop star who her music videos revolve around her killing men. And she has said publicly that in her universe, only men die, women never die. And female journalists have taken this as a point of celebration to say,
It's a fantasy.
you know, this is a wonderful world and we're all living in it. And can you imagine if it were the other way around and there was a male musician who's walking around, say, in every video depicting homicide against women and being celebrated for that? That would not happen today. And so this double standard, I feel for men as well, because I can understand why they feel so resentful and why they say, if you are going to say that it's okay that people harm us, we are going to have the exact same lack of empathy for you. So in terms of potential solutions, I know you're asking about like policy. I think we need to allow men to succeed and not see male success as something that is a threat to women or a threat to women's success. I think.
Bro, she just admitted it. That society thinks male success. It's a zero-sum game. When men succeed, less women succeed. She just said that. And Dickface here a second ago was just saying that when women succeed, men don't lose out. Really? Because she just said that herself. Homie, you fucking idiot. This guy, golly, he is a fucking jabron. He is smart as paint. Boy, I really, I just, that one really fucking pissed me off. She literally says that within 5 minutes of that jerk off saying it, that's not the case. Oh, really? Because that's how the feminists see it. Fucking asshole.
And I find it's basically men just giving up and trying to find an excuse for putting in the work that every man has had to put in to try and find a mate. Yeah, I see just so much. I don't like to use the words misogyny and misandry because that's hate, but I'll call it a bias. And I find the incel movement is men just giving up and leaning into really unfortunate biases against women and these myths that women's success has been inversely correlated to their decline and that it's women's fault. And
Can you believe that shit? How can this moron, first of all, how does he have the credentials? But how can this guy straight face sit there and say that when the females say the exact, bro, obviously it is a zero-sum game. She believes it. Society believes it. He's just trying to convince men, don't listen to your lying ears. Don't believe your lying eyes. That's not the case. How is that not the case, dude? He's like, oh, they're just mad that they have to do the same thing that men have always had to do in history. Oh, yeah? Well, not one man in history ever before the 20th century ever had to compete against his own potential mate. Yeah, we're being asked to do something similar. But my great-great-grandfather never had to compete with females to get hit for his job. I do. And it's just, this is why nothing gets fixed, because they refuse to acknowledge the real problems. Well, and it's an ideological thing. They have sacrificed generations of babies and my generation of men so that women could have a crack at C-suite corporations and shit. You know, so that a couple of generation of women could have fun playing man, playing husband or whatever. You know, it's like house. Yeah, they sacrificed millions of babies and a couple of generations of men's and a couple of generation of women. All for what? So that they could make a couple of billionaires, so that they could get a couple extra billionaires out of the bargain.
I find it's
Am I
basically
wrong?
men just giving up and trying to find an.
You know, am I wrong there? Is my take off? You know, tell me if you think I'm full of shit or if I don't know what I'm talking about, say something. Or if you see it differently, say something, you know. Maybe I'm wrong. Possible. You know, I'm not going to unleash, you know, the fury of hell on you. I'm just a little worked up at, you know, fuck bumps here.
Excuse for putting in the work that every man has had to put in to try and find a mate.
Oh, I
And at the
agree.
same time, I also see on the other side,
A lot of men
I
are
feel
to
like a
blame.
decent number of female-centered podcasts have this underlying theme of men are irredeemable, you know, toxic. Like this just the notion that men are somewhat worthless is become normalized. That, oh, of course, you know, men, you know, and that even in media, the best we can hope for is that a man who's kind of a dope and an idiot, very few redeeming qualities.
Like you, big dog, a dope and an idiot with a big stupid ass nose. He looks like he could be from the Jetsons. Straight up, this guy, he's like a walking, talking caricature.
Overcomes it and maybe at the end of the day is an okay guy. That's sort of the aspirational male in media right now. And that podcasting, especially, I find, especially the manosphere, everybody talks about it. That's just straight up misogyny. I think a lot of men repel on that.
Yeah, there's a lot of TikTok that's just straight up misandry. You know, whatever can be said about men and the red pill and content creators online can be said exactly the same for women in the same way, if not worse. They even, like they said, they found, at least in Britain, where it was like 7% of men had a bad view of women, and like half of women had a bad view of men. So it's, you know, and this misogyny stuff, like, you know how they always beat that drum of uh like wife beaters and that, like, they take the extreme 1% of cases and they pretend that that's all of them. And the way that everybody throws around misogyny, you'd think that women, were slaves or something. You'd think that things were a lot different. You would never guess that this was a gynocentric society. You would never guess that women are more successful than men in this society. You would never guess that men are like the underdog, the losers. By the way that women talk of misogyny, it sounds like we're 200 years ago. Am I wrong? Like, does anybody else think it's kind of crazy how the world that everybody, including most women, they just about, well, she needs a job because her husband, he's going to beat her. And it's like, really? God damn, I gave you more credit for that or than that. Because that's a really dumb take. That's like you're really low IQ if that's what you think. Honestly, though, that's such a rarity. Like there are those guys that do that kind of stuff. They're like as rare as serial killers, practically. I mean, not quite that rare, but those kind of people are pretty rare. Like truly pathological people that hurt people, harm people, want to cause misery, or like, and I get it, I think maybe in the past it was a little bit different. You'd have like Forrest Gump with Ginny. I think, probably, I'm sure that was more common back then than it is today. But today, it's like those are the very, very, very rare cases. And the world, the idea of the world that you would get by listening to women, and I get it. There's a lot of power in talking that way. When you talk that way, immediately you kind of put, if any men in the vicinity are kind of going to be put on the back foot. Although I would argue probably not anymore. I don't think anybody cares anymore. I think you're probably less apt to get what you want if you're talking about that stuff. But it's the same thing as black people with the victim culture. They get something out of it, but it's so wrong. It's off, and it's like it's slander. It slanders. It makes men out to be, like if men were what everything that women say they are, if men did everything women say that we did, and if we were as bad as all that, we would not be here today. We wouldn't have indoor plumbing. Women wouldn't have jobs. We wouldn't have all of the the amenities that we have. Good men got us to where we are today, not evil men. Good men that took care of their wives and their kids and fed them and treated them right and died for them. Let's not forget all the men that are fucking bought the mountains of bodies of men that died trying to fucking feed their wives and kids. Like, it's so ungrateful, so incredibly arrogant and ungrateful. How did our society become this negative? Well, I know how. It's godless. It jettisoned God, and rightfully, we're destined for the rubbish heap. I mean, there's a reason why religion matters, why ethos matters. We're reaping the fruits of that now.
Just say, no, that's just not true. I have enough sisters and women in my life to know that that's just not, that dog won't hunt. That's shit. That's a bunch of angry men looking for a community. But what doesn't get talked about a lot, and I'm curious if you witness it, is it's a mainstream podcast hosted by women. They've just generally assumed, or there's a notion that men are just vastly inferior and that they're cursed to like them. It's a curse that they have to put up with them or maybe try and find them because the majority of them are just not good people.
Yeah, Scott, it's hyperbole. They're fooling themselves, but nobody believes that they actually believe that. Nobody believes that, not for a second. It's cope, man. Opium. And it doesn't matter. And they're like women talking, bad mouthing men. Really, it says more about women, the women that do that. It's like you see a wife talking shit about her husband, and it's like, well, you married him. What's that say about you? You're a pretty low down, disgusting specimen. Like, what kind of a disloyal piece of scum are you? Like, I'll be careful not to turn my back to you. But I mean, it just makes those women look small, cheap, and petty and worthless themselves. Because, women of value and women that respect themselves, they respect men. Good women, the women that are worth a fuck, that are worth investing in, they treat men well. They show men respect. When men show them respect and and treat them treat them as they wish to be treated, they get it in return. But it's these low IQ, loudmouth, obnoxious harpies, witches running their mouths.
Or that they're borderline toxic. Am I being paranoid, or do you think that what I'll call and just as there's an anti-female bias that people talk about justifiably, but that same bias against men exists in the podcast medium?
I do think it goes both ways. And I've heard some female people in media use the term hetero fatality, something to that extent, which basically means we're attracted to men. We're straight, so we can't help it that we're attracted to men, but it's not good for us. And essentially, it's going to do us in at the end. In the end, so I think they're two sides of the same coin. And unfortunately, what I find is there's a bias in terms of not just what's acceptable in mainstream discourse. So you can rag all day about how much you hate men and men are trash and men are terrible and unalive all men, say hashtag unalive all men. And then if you say anything like that about women, understandably, that's not allowed. You'll get banned from social media or people call you out or call you a misogynist. I think it should not be allowed across the board. That's
Yeah, and it's crazy that even has to be said, and that this society even it actually tries to pretend that it cares about equality, that it cares about how human beings treat other human beings, but yet it treats half of the population like the redheaded stepchild, the whipping boy, and treats the other one like it's the good kid, the good child. And it's so stupid though. It's counterproductive. When men fail, everybody fail. When women fail, everybody fails. Like, it's stupid. One hand washes the other. If American men fail, America fails. American men are America. Like, what the hell? It's just, and American women are America. You American women can't just be left in the lurch and everything move on as normal. It's ridiculous, but it's like these people with their long march through the institutions, they are so stupid. And it's going to take like a collapse and them with egg on their face looking stupid. Yeah, it's like we're going to have to suffer some catastrophe because these people are feckless, don't know what they're doing. Like we used to have like old German guys with glasses telling us about physics and science. Now it's 30-year-old Asian girls. You know, some geisha girl from Taiwan or Thailand or something. No, I'm just kidding. I think she's Malaysian. I think she's a Malay. I mean, she's good looking, actually. She's actually very good looking. But, you know, I don't think she's like an intellectual heavyweight. She's not some intellectual giant. She's smart, but her contributions to the human race would be far greater being a tiger mom and having like 3 super smart Asian boys, like kicking ass and shit. That would be a contribution. This is a waste of her talents. She should be raising boys.
That's hateful across the board. You should not be able to, one, generalize an entire
Well, the
class of
future is
people.
female. Can you imagine saying the future is male? It's just
Well,
entirely different.
that they will not do this, but they still do behind closed doors. They just are not as flagrant about it.
And you were in academia and you left academia to do your own research and write your own books. I'm curious why you left academia. I would think that universities would be such a great platform for you. I'm just curious, like your career path and why you've chosen
Because
to kind of
they're
go
corrupt.
your own way, if you will.
I
Hey,
loved
folks,
when I was
welcome to
in
the Dark
academia. I loved my
Horse
research. So my
podcast.
PhD is in neuroscience, and I was doing brain imaging of human sexuality at the time. So I used 4 different types of brain scans to look at the structure and function of the human brain as it relates to human sexual arousal. And it was fascinating research. I still, to this day, when I was just looking at MRI scans the other day, and I got goosebumps because I remember how much fun it was. But I saw that the climate in academia has been changing, and I'd be curious to hear your thoughts on this as much as you'd be comfortable talking.
You know, actually, that's it for these videos. But I wanted to say something before I ended the stream, or, you know, just kind of do a little stream of consciousness. You know, I heard Scott Bessent. Well, I'll let him talk.
That Bessent delivered from Treasury yesterday.
To the ordinary.
I just wanted to play a small portion.
The ordinary soldiers supporting this regime, as more and more of your paychecks stop or are supposedly just delayed, ask whether your commanders are leading your country to triumph or to ruin. And recall that the Berlin Wall fell when ordinary soldiers decided not to shoot at their own people.
Okay, lay down your arms, overthrow the government, and we can get back to business. People don't realize what's happened under the surface in some of these races. So we covered it when Andy Ogles lost. We covered a bit when Chip Roy lost. But there's this interesting...
The final ones, the IRGC, of Treasury and other agencies will tighten the noose and block every potential source of revenue that funds the IRGC and the evil Iranian regime. We are enforcing a zero leakage approach. There will be no minimal breathing space for the regime to rebuild its capacity to inflict terror against America and the world. The final refuge of this regime is a mistaken conclusion of nations that still finance the Iranian threat in the hopes of evading it. It is no longer acceptable to operate in the gray spaces of this conflict. Countries cannot claim they are blind to enabling this activity.
The top trading partners with Iran are China, UAE, Turkey, Iraq, EU, India, Pakistan, Russian Federation, and Oman, according to CNBC.
You have at your disposal is the ability to impose secondary sanctions on banks and financial institutions that facilitate transactions for Iran. Chinese banks have often been talked about being targeted, but we don't see any of those institutions targeted here. Is that something that is coming in this campaign, or is the very delicate trade truce with China something that could prohibit you from going that far and taking that very big step?
We want to make clear here today that no one is above the reach of U.S. sanctions. That if they facilitate transactions and are part of the ecosystem that turns Iranian oil into money, into repression, they will be targeted. We find that the best way to engage with countries is through quiet diplomacy, and we are level setting with every country to tell them our expectations. We know who they are, they know who they are, so when the hammer of U.S. Treasury actions falls upon them, they will have no one to blame but themselves.
Man, that scares the hell out of me. Bro, or it's not that it scares the hell out of me, but what he's talking about, bro, he's talking about like our future. Because what he's talking about there with those sanctions, the world is already working to basically replace the dollar. The world is already had enough of our shit. It's already getting away from us. And, this stuff, when they play these games, it makes other countries not want to give us our advantages, these little advantages we have. The petrodollar and people using the dollar all over the world. And when he's talking like that, he's saying we're going to use that the advantage that the world gives us as it's a privilege because we won World War II and we're kind of protecting the ocean, supposedly. They give us a privilege. And he is talking about beating the shit out of them with that privilege. And that privilege is like the main reason why life has been so good in America. And it's why life is getting tougher in America, because they've been using that cudgel, that bludgeon, and it's getting less and less effective. They're building up immunities. They're doing without it. As same thing with gas when they do embargoes and stuff, our clean energy, I'm into solar and stuff now. We're already halfway there. We may as well get off of fossil fuels now. What's the point? Why should we let other countries have control and say over what we do when the sun is free? They don't own the fucking sun. We're already halfway there. Fuck them. Why do we? At this point, I'm kind of over I remember I used to be against it, fossil fuels, but our car industry is already in ruin. And the oil stuff, we're paying for gas and that fluctuates. People are sick of that. And also, it has a lot of control over our economy and stuff. And it's like we don't need to allow the Middle East to have outsized power and focus, because so much of the whole world has to care what happens in the Middle East because we use so much fuel, and nobody likes that. What we don't want that. Why are we getting them rich? It's just a bunch of brown weirdos in dresses with towels on their heads. Why are we getting them rich? I mean, it is the cheapest energy, but it's like, why shouldn't we build up alternatives? We may as well. We're getting there anyway. Seems like they're constantly jerking knots in our tail. Piss on that. But the way that he's talking here is so reckless and belligerent. It's going to have serious effects here in America. What he said there. Oh, we are going to use every tool in our thing. We're going to be ruthless and unreasonable. It's him just saying we're gonna push you off of the US dollar even more. We're going to squeeze the last bit of influence and power that we have left. And they're going to do it for Israel. That's what he's saying. We're going to use the last bit of our advantage and our power and influence, not for our people, not to make their lives better, not to make the standard of living of our people better. No, we're going to make it worse. But we want to help Israel. That's what's happening. It's such bullshit.
What do you make of that response, Ryan?
Yes, I mean he is very clearly threatening to sanction China, basically the countries that you just listed.
Right.
Like he's
That would not
threatening
be
to sanction
good.
China, all of our allies in the Gulf, India, Pakistan. And then he says,
For Israel.
I don't want to blow up. Why would I want to blow up the global economy?
Yeah.
Like, why haven't you done it already? Why would I want to?
I know what
So
you're
he's
doing.
already admitted that if he executes on his plan,
He's going to
it
blow
will
it up.
blow up the global economy. At another point, he said he was very close to sanctioning an entire major financial institution
Yes.
for moving Iranian money.
He said what to expect by the end of the week?
Maybe, he's like Trumpian.
Yeah.
Like it might happen
Wow.
by the end of the week.
Why are they
I'm really
doing-
close to doing it. A major financial institution like, say, Lehman Brothers. The reason that these institutions are structural is that they have.
I had like 9 likes on last night's stream, guys. Y'all can do better than that. For real though. 9. Good.
There are counterparties that have all of their trades that are closing there or moving through there, or their collateral is there, and so everybody if you seize that up and everybody runs out, or it's seized up and people can't get access to whatever their assets are that are in there, then all the counterparties that are all spread around it are also then at risk. And then anybody who's a counterparty to anybody around there. That's why when Lehman went down, it spread a financial crisis to the entire world. So
Our elites, they so flippantly just talk like they're so belligerent. You know, Besson, he's talking about a serious, like he's going to attack China and stuff. Bro, that is going to be serious economic hardships for us. Like big time. And it's disgusts me. It's the same way that the ideologues talk so flippantly about dating and intersexual dynamics. They talk like it's a game. And as if their opinion actually means something.
Besson is saying that he's considering doing that. He also says if he does the things he's saying he's going to do, it's going to blow up the global financial system. Therefore, he's not going to do that.
Right. Right.
Because as he said, why would I want to do that? You wouldn't want to do that. Therefore, he has put no time and no specifics on who and what.
Yeah.
So why does anybody believe, and maybe we can put up this next element, why would anybody believe that he's actually going to do anything? So put up A3. This is Mohammed Ghalibaf, the top Iranian negotiator, Speaker of the Parliament. Americans know that no one buys their bombast. The United States is not in an economic position to further restrict its relations with other countries. Iran's trading partners, both in the media and through messages sent to us, have made it clear that they don't take these statements into account anywhere. Because if he would follow through on his threat, he'd destroy himself. So what did you make of it?
Well, here's what it's really all about. So Doug Collins, we were talking about this yesterday, but Doug Collins then goes on Newsmax. He's cabinet secretary, he's VA secretary, and I think really gives the game away. This is what it's all about. We were speculating, and I think it's pretty obvious speculation, but he essentially, without attempting to reveal what's happening, kind of revealed what's happening. Let's roll A4.
But the biggest issue is you just saw what we just heard. The Iranians are reacting to this and so they understand that we've finally gotten to the real heart of the matter. We've already beat them down with the best military in the world. Now it's time to just take their money and go from there.
We've already beat them militarily, so now it's time to take their money. And Ryan, this is what we were discussing yesterday, and I think the fact that he went on TV and said that, again, just gives the game away. We have exhausted military options. He says, he framed it as we have defeated them militarily, but we've exhausted the military options that we are willing to use.
Well, they're not playing fair because we beat them, but they just won't admit it.
They won't admit it,
Yeah.
which is, it's
deeply unfair.
Deeply
It's like,
unfair.
game's over, scoreboard, we won. They're still out there playing.
Yeah, amazing how that works.
You can't do that. Give us
Shouldn't
your
someone
money.
step in? Yeah.
Give us your money.
Someone should step in.
Yeah.
But that's what it's really all about, is that they have military options. The military options that remain involve escalation trap. And if they were to pursue
It's on
them
tomorrow?
Yeah, I think it is on
Escalation.
tomorrow. I think you do have rubber paper on tomorrow.
Escalation paper will be on tomorrow.
Escalation pape. But that is really what this is all about. They're trying desperately to avoid the escalation trap and to squeeze Iran. One other thing that Besant said, Let's actually jump here to A6, because this underscores what you heard from Doug Collins. This is another line that Besant delivered from Treasury yesterday.
To the ordinary soldiers supporting this regime, as more and more of your paychecks stop or are supposedly just delayed, ask whether your commanders are leading your country to triumph or to ruin. And recall that the Berlin Wall fell.
Maybe our command or our soldiers should be asking that. Like with the Abraham Lincoln aircraft carrier that didn't touch port for 6 months. That's insane. Maybe you need to answer those questions.
When ordinary soldiers decided not to shoot at their own people.
Okay, lay down your arms, overthrow the government, and we can get back to business as usual.
Right, because we won.
Yeah. That's what
Right.
this is all about. They're still desperately trying to find some way without escalating militarily, without losing more Americans, and without continuing to expose this crunch in our weapons supply. So now they've turned to this hazy, vague economic threatening that they're rolling out in a really Trumpian way, where it's framed grandly, it's framed.
Trump, he'll be known for just being vaporware, just an idea that poof, it's like magic. He, sort of like weaves this hologram, and then when the showdown arrives and it's time to put up or shut up, it just turns into smoke, disappears.
Like some
He'll
super
be known
cohesive
for that.
strategy, and it's escalating threats instead of escalating military or escalating real hard financial decisions. Unless he rolls something out by the end of the week. I mean, we'll see. Even the tariffs we're going to get to in a moment aren't supposed to take place until January 1st. So they're doing threats to try and bring Iran to the table. I don't know.
And Iran was at the table. Iran was at the table multiple times over the past decade.
And
But they were at the table in February when we launched the war. And then they were at the table again throughout the MOU, in which they agreed to keep the strait open while negotiating the remaining pieces. Trump couldn't keep the 60-day truce going just to get through the negotiations. So in February, while Iran was at the table, Netanyahu made a certain series of promises. We could kill the Ayatollah and his top commanders. We with the Kurds, we would go in and we would spark
Did you guys know that Saladin, Sahaladin, it was Alahadin or whatever, Saladin in the Crusades was a Kurd. King of the Muslims was a Kurd. Like, I didn't realize how great of a people they actually were at one point. They ruled like all of the Muslim empire and defeated the Europeans in the Crusades famously. Isn't that legit? Like, I didn't know that, and good for the Kurds. They're like the Armenians. They're kind of like the nonconformists. It seems like they've kind of gotten they get the crappy end of the stick, I guess. They should have their own country, and it should be called Kurdistan. They did for centuries, I think, but they don't. And they're basically homeless, wandering from nation to nation. But I just thought that was pretty neat when I heard that back the other day.
uprising. We would overthrow the regime, greet it as liberators. It would go very quickly, and none of that has. Oh, they would not close the Strait of.
That's it for tonight, fellas. I covered the gamut there. I might take tomorrow off, guys. Maybe not, or tonight off would be Wednesday night. There's a chance I might. But anyway, you guys enjoyed the show. I'm trying to be a little bit more even keeled, not be so animated. Anyway, that's it for tonight, fellas. I will see you guys either tomorrow night or certainly on Thursday night. I mean, most likely I'll probably do tomorrow night. Just giving you all a heads up, though. Over and out. Good night. Thank you for chit-chatting, Rasheen, Goldie, Cowboy, NZ, Nook Zed, she's in bed, but GQ, all of my homies, my Negroes. Blessed day.